തോളുരുമ്മി പ്രവർത്തിച്ച് സംഘടനാ പ്രവർത്തനത്തിൽ സ്ത്രീ സാന്നിധ്യത്തിന് അടിത്തറ പാകി അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് സർവ്വ പിന്തുണയും നൽകി താങ്ങും തണലുമായി വർത്തിച്ച മഹതിയായിരുന്നു ഡോക്ടർ ഗഫൂർ സാഹിബിൻ്റെ പ്രിയതമ ഫാത്തിമ ഗഫൂർ. മണപ്പാട് കൊച്ചുമൊയ്തീൻ ഹാജിയുടെയും കറുകപ്പാടത്ത് കുഞ്ഞാച്ചുമ്മയുടെയും മകനായി 1929 ഡിസംബർ 25 ജനിച്ച ഡോക്ടർ പി.കെ. അബ്ദുൽ ഗഫൂർ 1984 അകാലത്തിൽ വിട ചൊല്ലിയപ്പോൾ ഭാവി തലമുറയ്ക്ക് വ്യക്തമായ പ്രവർത്തന പന്ഥാവ് വെട്ടിത്തെളിയിക്കാൻ ഇടം നൽകിയ, കൊടുങ്കാറ്റിലും പേമാരിയിലും തകരാതെ MES എന്ന നൗകയെ ശക്തമായ കരങ്ങളിൽ ഭദ്രമാക്കിയ ആ സാമൂഹിക നവോത്ഥാന നായകന്റെ ഓർമ്മകൾക്ക് മരണമില്ല. അവ ഇന്നും തൻ്റെ പുതിയ തലമുറയാൽ പ്രകാശപൂരിതമാണ്.
A society that dreamed of success but lost its way in utter darkness was badly in need of a navigator to drive them to the light of knowledge. The elementary lessons that lead to wisdom, knowledge is power, were unknown to society. The untiring efforts of a visionary group helped this society to step onto the path of wisdom. This unique set of people aspired for the overall development of a community and struggled against great odds to navigate them towards the mainstream of life. Muslim Educational Society, established in 1964, achieved a remarkable transformation in the educational status of Muslim society. It was the socially committed and timely venture of a group of Muslim intellectuals led by Dr. Abdul Ghafoor. Dr. Abdul Ghafoor, the founder-president of the Muslim Educational Society, dedicated his life for an educational revolution and pledged to keep the lamp of knowledge aloft to illuminate the life of a society. Before the inception of the MES, Muslims were extremely backward and lacked sufficient educational institutions and other amenities for learning. The Herculean efforts made by MES in conducting seminars, symposia and awareness meets throughout the length and breadth of Kerala drastically altered the outlook of the society and their attitude towards education in particular. The MES has established a medical college, an engineering college, arts and science colleges, a number of schools, hostels, hospitals, cultural centers, orphanages and industrial training centers. Now, the society is running 150 institutions, which contribute largely to the social growth and educational development of minorities. The last 4 decades have witnessed a remarkable transformation in the educational status of Muslim community. The driving force behind this achievement is the Muslim Educational Society.
someone else who loves me like you used to. Sometimes we're not ourselves, there's no one I can turn to. And I know all the feelings that we shared are in the past. And I know your relationships are never meant to last. And I'll take some time, but I'll be alright. We're moving on, we're moving on. I know time.
നമ്മുടെ വിശിഷ്ടാതിഥി വേദിയിൽ എത്തിക്കഴിഞ്ഞിരിക്കുന്നു.
ഇതിലെന്താ രാഷ്ട്രീയ വിവാദം വരാൻ ആവശ്യം എനിക്ക് മനസ്സിലായി. ഞാൻ സ്വാഭാവികമായിട്ട് യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റീസിൽ ക്യാമ്പസസിൽ ഇന്ത്യ മുഴുവനും ലോകം മുഴുവൻ സംസാരിച്ചു. അത് വലിയ അതിശയം കാണുന്നു.
സാർ, ഇന്നിപ്പം ദീപിക പത്രത്തിൽ വന്നൊരു ഇൻ്റർവ്യൂ വലിയ രീതിയിൽ വിവാദമായിട്ടുണ്ട്. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് കോൺഗ്രസിനുള്ളിൽ തന്നെ വലിയ രീതിയിൽ അങ്ങക്കെതിരെ ഒരു പടപ്പുറപ്പാടുണ്ടോ എന്ന തരത്തിലുള്ള ചില പരാമർശങ്ങളൊക്കെ പല ഭാഗത്തു നിന്നും വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് അങ്ങ് മുഖ്യമന്ത്രിയാകാൻ തയ്യാറാണ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിന് താൻ സന്നദ്ധനാണ് എന്നൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ള തങ്ങളുടെ പരാമർശം
എനിക്കറിയില്ല അവരെന്തൊക്കെയാണ് പുതിയത്. കാരണം കുറേ സംസാരിച്ചിട്ട് ഞാൻ എപ്പോഴും പറയുന്നൊരു കാര്യമാണ്, ആ മുഖ്യമന്ത്രിക്ക് നല്ലൊരു ഭൂരിപക്ഷമുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ 2026 വരെ ഈ വിഷയത്തെക്കുറിച്ച് ചിന്ത ചെയ്യാനേ ആവശ്യമില്ല. മാധ്യമക്കാർ ഓരോരോ ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ ചോദിച്ചിട്ട് അതിൻ്റെ ഓരോരോ മറുപടി എങ്ങനെയെങ്കിലും വലിയൊരു ഹെഡ്ലൈനാക്കാൻ ചോദിച്ചാൽ ഞാൻ പറയുന്നു, ഈ കാര്യത്തിലൊക്കെ നമുക്ക് ശരിക്കും ചർച്ച ചെയ്യാൻ ആവശ്യമില്ല. സമയം വരട്ടെ. എന്തായാലും ജനങ്ങളാണ് തീരുമാനിക്കുന്നത്. അതുമാത്രമല്ല, മുഖ്യമന്ത്രി ആവാൻ ഒരു പാർട്ടിക്ക് ഭൂരിപക്ഷം ഉണ്ടാകും, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു ഫ്രണ്ടിനൊരു ഭൂരിപക്ഷം ഉണ്ടാകും. അതൊക്കെ വരട്ടെ. നമുക്കിങ്ങനെ എന്താണ് ഒരു കെട്ടുന്ന മുമ്പ് തന്നെ ടോപ്പ് ഫ്ലോറിലത്തെ ഫേർണിച്ചറിനെ മാറ്റേണ്ടതാണ്.
ഈ വിഷയം ഉയർന്നു വന്നപ്പോൾ തന്നെ ഔചിത്യ പ്രശ്നം ചൂണ്ടിക്കാണിച്ച് ഒരുപാട് കോൺഗ്രസിലെ നേതാക്കൾ രംഗത്ത് വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്.
എല്ലാവർക്കും അവർ സ്വന്തം അഭിപ്രായം പറയാനുള്ള അവകാശമുണ്ട്. സൗന്ദര്യം
ഹൈക്കമാൻഡിനോട് അഭിപ്രായം പറയണമെന്നാണ് താരിഖ് അൻവർ എന്ന് തിരുവനന്തപുരത്ത് പറഞ്ഞത്. താരിഖ് അൻവർ പറഞ്ഞതേ ശശി തരൂർ പറയേണ്ടത് ഹൈക്കമാൻഡിനോടാണ് അഭിപ്രായം എന്നാണ് പറഞ്ഞത്. ഹൈക്കമാൻഡാണ്
അഭിപ്രായമേ ഇല്ലേതിന് മാധ്യമക്കാർ ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ അവരും ചോദിച്ചു ഞാൻ മറുപടി പറയാൻ. എന്തായാലും എനിക്ക് ഹൈക്കമാൻഡിനൊപ്പോ താരിഖിനൊപ്പോ ഒരു തീരുമാനം എടുത്തിട്ട് എല്ലാം എല്ലാവരും പറയുന്നത്. പാർലമെന്റിലേക്ക് ഇനി 1.25 വർഷമുണ്ട്. അത് ആ സമയത്ത് ഒരു തീരുമാനമെടുക്കണം. പാർട്ടിക്കെടുക്കണം, യൂണിക്കെടുക്കണം, കക്ഷിയെടുക്കണം, എല്ലാം ചെയ്യേണ്ടത്. അത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് ഇനിയും 2 വർഷം കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് എന്തോ നമ്മുടെ സംസ്ഥാനത്ത് ഇന്ന് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് എല്ലാവർക്കും വലിയ ധൃതിയും.
സാർ ഈ പര്യടനം നടത്തുന്നതും സാർ പങ്കെടുക്കുന്ന പരിപാടികളൊക്കെ എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഇത്ര വലിയ വിവാദങ്ങളും വലിയ വാർത്തകളും?
അതാണ് എന്റെ ചോദ്യം. നിങ്ങൾ എന്നോട് ചോദിക്കും.
അല്ല, അതിൽ ഈ നേതാക്കൾ എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് അസ്വസ്ഥരായത്?
കുറേ കാലമായി ഞാൻ എല്ലാവരും പോകുന്ന, പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് നിങ്ങളുടെ പ്രോഗ്രാമിൽ 14 വർഷം നോക്കിയാൽ ഒരു 400-450 സ്പീച്ചുകൾ ഞാൻ നടത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട് ഓരോരോ കോളേജിൽ. അത് ഇന്ത്യയിൽ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് എല്ലാ സംസ്ഥാനത്തും. അപ്പോൾ ഈ സ്ഥിതിയിൽ നിങ്ങൾ എന്നെ എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് വേറെ ആയിട്ട് കാണുന്നത്? ഞാനിപ്പോൾ ഈ ഫസൽ ഗഫൂറിൻ്റെ ക്ഷണം സ്വീകരിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. നമ്മൾ പറ്റിയില്ല. ഞാൻ വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളെ കാണാനാണ് ഇരിക്കുന്നത്. അവർ പാവങ്ങൾ കാത്തിരിക്കുന്നു. നിങ്ങളതിനെ നടത്തി പിടിക്കരുത്. പക്ഷേ പറയാൻ പോകുന്ന കാര്യം, ഇതിൽ എന്താ ഇത്ര വലിയൊരു അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ഈ വലിയൊരു ചടങ്ങിന് പബ്ലിസിറ്റി കിട്ടിയ നല്ല കാര്യം. പക്ഷേ എനിക്ക് ഈ പബ്ലിസിറ്റിയാണ്
ഞങ്ങളെക്കാൾ കൂടുതൽ ഉദ്യോഗം കാണിക്കുന്നത്. അതായത് ഈ BJP CPM അല്ല ഇതിന് ഒരു അസ്വസ്ഥത പ്രകടിപ്പിക്കുന്നത്, കോൺഗ്രസിനുള്ളിൽ നിന്ന് തന്നെയാണ്.
അത് അതും ചോദിക്കുന്നത് എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഓക്കെ. രീതിയായി. എല്ലാ ദിവസവും ഇതൊരു കടമയാണ് ജനങ്ങളൊക്കെ സമ്പർക്കം ചെയ്യാനും അവരുടെ ആശയം മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ അവരുടെ ചിന്തകൾ അറിയാനും സംസാരിക്കും. ഇതൊക്കെ ഞാൻ ചെയ്യുന്നത് പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളൊക്കെ വരുമ്പോൾ എനിക്കൊരു ഇൻറ്ററാക്ഷനാണ് തീരെ എന്താ അവരുടെ ചോദ്യങ്ങളും അവരുടെ കോമൻസും കേട്ടിട്ട് എനിക്ക് അതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് ചിന്തിക്കാനും അതിന് മറുപടി പറയാനും അതിനെ എൻ്റെ മനസ്സിലൊന്ന് കൂട്ടി വയ്ക്കാനും അങ്ങനെയുള്ള സംസാരത്തിലാണ് ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ യുവാക്കളുടെ ആവശ്യങ്ങളെക്കുറിച്ചും അവരുടെ ഭാവിയെക്കുറിച്ചും ചിന്തിക്കാനൊരു അവസരം കിട്ടും. അത് ഇപ്പോൾ കുറച്ച് വർഷങ്ങളായി. പക്ഷേ ഈ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ഇന്നാളൊക്കെ കാണുന്ന കാര്യങ്ങൾ നമ്മളുടെ യുവാക്കൾ സംസ്ഥാനം വിട്ടുപോകുന്ന ഒരു സ്ഥിതി ഗ്രാജുവേഷൻ കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് അന്യ സംസ്ഥാനത്തിലോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അന്യ രാജ്യങ്ങൾക്ക് പോകാനുള്ള ഒരു ശ്രമം. അപ്പോൾ എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് കേരളം അവർക്ക് ഒരു അട്രാക്റ്റീവ് സ്ഥലമായിട്ട് കാണുന്നില്ല? എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് നമ്മൾ അവർക്ക് അവസരം കൊടുക്കാത്തതുകൊണ്ടാണ് ജോലി ചെയ്യാനും നന്നായിരിക്കാനും ഇതൊക്കെ ചോദിക്കുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ ഇതെല്ലാം വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളൊപ്പം മനസ്സിലാണ് ഞാൻ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. ഇതിൽ ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ അഭിപ്രായത്തിൽ ഒരു വ്യക്തിയായിട്ടും ഒരു രാഷ്ട്രപ്രതിനിധിയായിട്ടും ഇതിൻ്റെ ജോലി ചെയ്യുകയാണ് എൻ്റെ ഒരു കടമ.
അപ്പോൾ സാറേ ഇനിയിപ്പം കേരളത്തിൽ കോൺസെൻട്രേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാം.
നോക്കൂ, ഞാൻ എന്തായാലും ഇതെൻ്റെ കർമ്മഭൂമിയാണല്ലോ. ഞാൻ തിരുവനന്തപുരത്തിന് പ്രതിനിധിയാണ്. തിരുവനന്തപുരം ഏത് സംസ്ഥാനത്താണ്? അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ ഞാൻ പറയാം, ഞാൻ കേരളത്തിൽ അല്ലേ ഈ 14 വർഷം. പക്ഷേ ആളുകൾ തെളിയില്ല. അവിടെയും കുറേ ഇന്നത്തെ ചടങ്ങിൽ വേറെ സ്ഥലത്ത് ഞാൻ പോകാറുണ്ട്. എനിക്ക് അതിനെ ചുരുക്കണോ കൂടുതൽ സമയം കൂടെ നോക്കാം. എന്തായാലും ഞാൻ ഇത് ഒരൊറ്റ ഇൻവിറ്റേഷനും ഞാൻ സ്വീകരിച്ചിട്ടില്ല. അപ്പം ഞാൻ ആവശ്യപ്പെട്ടതല്ല. ഞാൻ എന്നെ ക്ഷണിച്ചു, ഞാൻ അക്സെപ്റ്റ് ചെയ്തു, ഞാൻ വന്നു. അതുപോലെ എനിക്ക് എല്ലാ ആഴ്ചയും 40% അപ്പോൾ എല്ലാം കൂടി അക്സെപ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ സാധിക്കും. നമ്മൾ കൂടുതൽ വരാൻ സാധിക്കാത്ത സ്ഥിതിയിലാണ്. പക്ഷേ 20 സ്ഥലത്ത് വരുമ്പോൾ അതിന് എൻ്റെ അഭിപ്രായത്തിൽ ഒരു വലിയൊരു വിവാദമാക്കാൻ ഒരു ആവശ്യമില്ല. ഞാൻ പറയുന്ന കാര്യങ്ങൾ കേൾക്കും. അതിൽ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഞാൻ അതിനെക്കുറിച്ചൊരു തത്വം
അവർ ക്ഷണിച്ചതാണോ?
നോക്കൂ, എല്ലാവരും ഞാൻ കുറേ വർഷങ്ങൾ അറിയുന്ന വ്യക്തിയാണ്. അസുഖങ്ങൾ ഇരുന്നിട്ടായിരുന്നു. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് കാണുന്നത്. അതൊരു മര്യാദയാണ്. പക്ഷേ ബാക്കിയല്ല എല്ലാ പബ്ലിക് ഫംഗ്ഷൻ, ഏത് പബ്ലിക് ഫംഗ്ഷനായാലും അവർ എന്നെ ക്ഷണിച്ചത് ഞാൻ എവിടെയും പോയിട്ട് എനിക്ക് വേണ്ടി ഒരു ഫംഗ്ഷൻ ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്നത് പറയും. അങ്ങനെ ഒരു സമയമില്ലേ, അങ്ങനെ ചെയ്യാനും ആഗ്രഹമില്ല, ആവശ്യം.
ഈ എതിർപ്പുകൾ അവഗണിച്ച് സജീവമായി മുന്നോട്ട് പോകാൻ തന്നെയാണ് തീരുമാനം.
നോക്കൂ, നമ്മൾ ഇപ്പം എന്തായാലും മുന്നോട്ട് പോട്ടെ. ഈ ചടങ്ങിലൊന്നും പങ്കെടുക്കാം.
നമ്മുടെ വിശിഷ്ടാതിഥി ഡോക്ടർ ശശി തരൂർ വേദിയിലേക്ക് വന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നു.
സംസ്ഥാന ഭാരവാഹി സ്റ്റേജിലോട്ട് വരണം. പ്രൊഫസർ POG ലബസാഹിബ്, മലപ്പുറം ജില്ലാ മുസ്ലിം ജില്ലാ സെക്രട്ടറി.
Respected members of MES Medical College and Muslim Society, we proudly welcome you to the 40th commemoration of Professor Dr. P.K. Abdul Ghafoor.
Today on this day, we remember
the founder of Muslim Education Society, and we remember the ethics and principles on which this Academy of Medical Sciences was built on. We are honored to have a member of Parliament, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, as our speaker and orator for the day.
And he will be speaking on the subject
and
of
he will be speaking on the subject of Indian Constitution perspectives. And we'll also get a chance for our students to interact with our Honorable Sir.
So without no further
ado, we start our program. I invite Mr. K.K. Kunyavedi, General Secretary of MES Kerala, for the welcome address.
യോഗാധ്യക്ഷൻ MBSന്റെ ആദരണീയനായ സംസ്ഥാന പ്രസിഡന്റ് ഡോക്ടർ ടി ഹസൻ സാഹിബ്, ഇന്നത്തെ നമ്മുടെ ഈ ചടങ്ങിലെ മുഖ്യാതിഥി ആദരണീയനായ ഡോക്ടർ ശശി തരൂർ MP, MBSന്റെ സീനിയർ നേതാവും സംസ്ഥാന ജനറൽ സെക്രട്ടറിയുമായ പ്രൊഫസർ POJ ലബസാർ, MBSന്റെ സംസ്ഥാന ഷാഷി സലാഹുദ്ദീൻ ഉൾപ്പെടെയുള്ള സംസ്ഥാന ഭാരവാഹികളെ, മലപ്പുറം ജില്ലാ കമ്മിറ്റിയുടെ പ്രസിഡന്റ്, സെക്രട്ടറി ഉൾപ്പെടെയുള്ള പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട നേതാക്കളെ, സദസ്സിലിരിക്കുന്ന MBSന്റെ ആദരണീയരായ നേതാക്കളെ, പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട അധ്യാപക സുഹൃത്തുക്കളെ, നമ്മുടെ പ്രൊഫഷണൽ കോളേജിലെ വിദ്യാർത്ഥിനികളെ, പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട സുഹൃത്തുക്കളെ, MBSന്റെ സ്ഥാപക പ്രസിഡന്റ് പ്രൊഫസർ ഡോക്ടർ PK അബ്ദുൽ ഗഫൂർ സാഹിബിന്റെ 40ാമത് ചരമവാർഷികത്തോടനുബന്ധിച്ച് ആണ് നമ്മൾ ഈ പ്രോഗ്രാം കണ്ടക്ട് ചെയ്തിരിക്കുന്നത്. ഇന്ത്യൻ കോൺസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷൻ പെർസ്പെക്റ്റീവ് എന്ന സബ്ജക്റ്റാണ് നമ്മളിവിടെ ചർച്ച ചെയ്യപ്പെടുന്നത്. അത്തരമൊരു വിഷയം ചർച്ച ചെയ്യാൻ ഏറ്റവും അനുയോജ്യനായ ഒരു വ്യക്തിയെ തന്നെയാണ് നമുക്ക് ലഭിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളത്. നമുക്ക് അതിൽ അനൽപമായ ആഹ്ലാദവും സന്തോഷവും എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ കർത്തവ്യത്തിലേക്ക് കടക്കുകയാണ്. ഈ ചടങ്ങിൽ അധ്യക്ഷത വഹിക്കുന്നത് ഡോക്ടർ PK അബ്ദുൽ ഗഫൂർ സാഹിബിന്റെ MBSന്റെ 6 പ്രാവശ്യം നിരന്തരമായി തുടർച്ചയായി MBSന്റെ സംസ്ഥാന പ്രസിഡന്റായി യാതൊരു എതിർപ്പുമില്ലാതെ തെരഞ്ഞെടുക്കപ്പെട്ട ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂട്ടിന്റെ ഡയറക്ടർ കൂടിയായ മെഡിക്കൽ കോളേജ് ഡയറക്ടർ കൂടിയായ ആദരണീയനായ ഡോക്ടർ ഗഫൂർ സാഹിബ് ഗംഭീരമായ ചടങ്ങിൽ അതിഥിയായി ഈ വിഷയത്തിൽ എന്ന വിഷയത്തിൽ ഗഹനമായ ചിന്തകൾ നമ്മളുമായി പങ്കുവെക്കുന്നതിനെത്തിയ MP ഡോക്ടർ ശശി തരൂർ അവരെ ഞാൻ വളരെ ആദരപൂർവ്വം ഈ ചടങ്ങിലേക്ക് സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യുന്നു. MBSന്റെ സംസ്ഥാന ട്രഷറർ, പുതിയതായി തിരഞ്ഞെടുക്കപ്പെട്ട സംസ്ഥാന ട്രഷറർ, മലപ്പുറം ജില്ലയുടെ കരുത്തനായ നേതാവ് ശ്രീ OC സലാഹുദ്ദീൻ, MBSന്റെ സീനിയർ നേതാവ് എഞ്ചിനീയറിംഗ് കോളേജുകളുടെ സ്റ്റാൻഡിംഗ് കമ്മിറ്റി ചെയർമാൻ പ്രൊഫസർ POJ ലബസാർ, MBSന്റെ സംസ്ഥാന വൈസ് പ്രസിഡന്റുമാരായ സീനിയർ വൈസ് പ്രസിഡന്റ് EP മൊയ്യൻകുട്ടി, വൈസ് പ്രസിഡന്റുമായ TM സക്കീർ ഹുസൈൻ, MM അഷ്റഫ്, സംസ്ഥാന സെക്രട്ടറിമാരായ CT സക്കീർ ഹുസൈൻ, A ജബ്ബാർ അലി, VP അബ്ദുറഹ്മാൻ, SMS മുജിബുർ റഹ്മാൻ, അതുപോലെ തന്നെ മലപ്പുറം ജില്ലയുടെ പുതിയ പ്രസിഡന്റ് ഷാഫി ഹാജി, മലപ്പുറം ജില്ലയുടെ സെക്രട്ടറി ശ്രീ ഉമ്മർ ഗുരുക്കൾ, MES മെഡിക്കൽ കോളേജിൻ്റെ ഡെപ്യൂട്ടി മെഡിക്കൽ സൂപ്രണ്ട് ഊർജ്ജസ്വലനായ ഡോക്ടർ ഹമീദ് ഫസൽ, മറ്റു സദസ്സിലിരിക്കുന്ന MESന്റെ പ്രിയങ്കരായ നേതാക്കളെ, നമ്മുടെ വിവിധ തൊട്ടടുത്തുള്ള സ്ഥാപനങ്ങളിൽ നിന്ന് എത്തിയിരിക്കുന്ന പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട അധ്യാപക സുഹൃത്തുക്കളെ, പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട വിദ്യാർത്ഥിനികളെ, മെഡിക്കൽ കോളേജിലെ ഡെൻ്റൽ കോളേജ് ഉൾപ്പെടെ നഴ്സിംഗ് കോളേജ് ഉൾപ്പെടെയുള്ള സ്ഥാപനങ്ങളിലെ പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട ജീവനക്കാരെ, ഫാക്കൽറ്റി മെമ്പേഴ്സ്, എല്ലാവർക്കും ഞാൻ ഹൃദയത്തിൻ്റെ ഭാഷയിൽ നിങ്ങളെല്ലാവരെയും സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യുകയാണ്. നമ്മുടെ ഗസ്റ്റിനെ പരിചയപ്പെടുത്താൻ ശ്രീ ഹമീദ് ഫസൽ ഉണ്ട് എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. ഞാൻ കൂടുതൽ കാര്യങ്ങളിൽ കടക്കുന്നില്ല. 1-2 കാര്യങ്ങൾ പറഞ്ഞ് ഞാൻ അവസാനിപ്പിക്കുകയാണ്, കാരണം സമയം വൈകി. ഐക്യരാഷ്ട്ര സംഘടനയിൽ 3 പതിറ്റാണ്ട് കാലം വിവിധ പദവികളിൽ സേവനമനുഷ്ഠിച്ചതിന് ശേഷമാണ് അദ്ദേഹം ഇന്ത്യയിലേക്ക് തിരിച്ചെത്തുന്നത്. എഴുത്തുകാരൻ, ഇന്ത്യൻ നാഷണൽ കോൺഗ്രസിൻ്റെ സമുന്നത നേതാക്കളിൽ ഒരാൾ, 2019 മുതൽ തിരുവനന്തപുരത്തു നിന്നുള്ള പാർലമെൻ്ററി മെമ്പർ, മുൻ കേന്ദ്രമന്ത്രി, പാർലമെൻ്റ് സ്റ്റാൻഡിംഗ് കമ്മിറ്റി ചെയർമാൻ തുടങ്ങി ഒട്ടേറെ സ്ഥാനങ്ങൾ വഹിച്ച ബഹുമുഖ പ്രതിഭയെയാണ് നമുക്ക് ഇന്ന് അതിഥിയായി കിട്ടിയിരിക്കുന്നത്. സോഷ്യൽ മീഡിയയിൽ ഒറ്റ കാര്യം പറഞ്ഞ് അവസാനിപ്പിക്കുന്നു. സോഷ്യൽ മീഡിയയിൽ ഏറ്റവും അധികം ഫോളോവേഴ്സുള്ള ഇന്ത്യയിലെ ഒരു പ്രമുഖ രാഷ്ട്രീയ നേതാവാണ് ശ്രീ ശശി തരൂർ. MESൻ്റെ അദ്ദേഹവുമായി വലിയ ബന്ധമുണ്ട്. MESൻ്റെ 5ാമത്തെയോ 6ാമത്തെയോ പ്രസിഡന്റ് വിശദീകരിക്കുന്നുള്ളതുകൊണ്ട് കൂടുതൽ കടക്കുന്നില്ല. ദുബായിൽ ഉൾപ്പെടെ MESൻ്റെ വിവിധ പരിപാടികളിൽ അദ്ദേഹം അതിഥിയായി കടന്നു വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. കൂടുതൽ കാര്യങ്ങളിലേക്ക് ഞാൻ കടക്കുന്നില്ല, സമയം പരിമിതമാണ്. ഏതായാലും ഒരിക്കൽ കൂടി ഡോക്ടർ ശശി തരൂർ ഉൾപ്പെടെയുള്ള വേദിയിലിരിക്കുന്ന മറ്റെല്ലാവരെയും ഞാൻ ഹൃദയത്തിൻ്റെ ഭാഷയിൽ ഊഷ്മളമായി സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ട് നിർത്തുന്നു. നന്ദി, നമസ്കാരം, ജയ് ഹിന്ദ്.
I now invite our beloved President of MES Kerala and Director of MES Medical Technical Sciences, Dr. Prof. Ghafoor, for the presidential address.
അതെ ബഹുമാനപ്പെട്ട MESൻ്റെ സുഹൃത്ത് ശ്രീ ശശി തരൂർ, വേദിയിലുള്ള മറ്റ് വിശിഷ്ടാതിഥികളെ, MES പ്രവർത്തകരെ, നമ്മുടെ സ്ഥാപനങ്ങളുടെ വിവിധ പ്രതിനിധികളെ, വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളെ, ഡോക്ടർ ശശി തരൂരിനെ ഇൻട്രൊഡ്യൂസ് ചെയ്യേണ്ടതെന്ന് ചോദിച്ചപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു ദാറ്റ് വിൽ ബി ആൻ ഇൻസൾട്ട് ടു ഹിം. Somebody goes and introduces Dr. Shashi Tharoor. അപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു അതിൻ്റെ ആവശ്യമില്ല, എല്ലാവർക്കും ശശി തരൂരിനെ അറിയാം. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് അറിയാത്ത ഒരാളുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അദ്ദേഹം ഒരു അക്ഷരവൈരിയായിരിക്കണം. സോ ആസ് ഫാർ ആസ് ഐ ആം കൺസേൺഡ്, എൻ്റെ ഫസ്റ്റ് what should I say, acquaintance with Dr. Shashi Tharoor is by reading his book, Show Business, if my memory is correct. Yes. The book was, I think, Show Business, in which I think main character was based on Amitabh Bachchan. Then I read Nehru, the biography of Nehru by Sri Tharoor. Then recently I read Era of Darkness, The Hindu Way, and Why I Am Hindu, etc., etc. And the only thing I would like to say is that he is the last standing fortress against the onslaught of the Hindutva forces in India. That is why we are supporting him. It is not on a political basis. And I think that is why all over Kerala he is being supported. It has got nothing to do with the Congress groupism or the politics of the UDF or LDF and all. The audience which Dr. Shashi Tharoor has is the fruits of his work on the secular field for the past 3 or 4 decades. കഴിഞ്ഞ 4-5 തലമുറകളായിട്ട്, ദശാബ്ദങ്ങളായിട്ട് ഇന്ത്യയിലെ മതേതരത്വത്തിന് വേണ്ടി മുന്നിൽ നിന്ന് പോരാടിയിട്ടുള്ള ദാനവീരശൂര കർണനാണ് ശ്രീ ശശി തരൂർ എന്ന് ഞാൻ പറയാൻ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നു. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് MES, അതിപ്പോൾ നിങ്ങൾ വിചാരിക്കും ഇപ്പം ഈ ഒരു അന്തരീക്ഷത്തിൽ വിളിച്ചാൽ നല്ല. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് ഒരുപാട് തവണ ഞങ്ങൾ MESൻ്റെ പരിപാടിയിൽ അദ്ദേഹം വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. ദുബായിൽ ഓൾസോ he came once for an MES program there. So we have got such a long standing relationship with him. Now I'll take just 20 minutes because just to give you an idea of why we call Dr. Shashi Tharoor here. We have got 2 major doubts in our mind, sir. One is that, is this country a federal country or not? The second question is that whether it remains a secular country or not. These are the 2 questions which are in our mind and in the minds of every Indian who loves India. There is no use in denigrating Jawaharlal Nehru or Mahatma Gandhi and all. This is the fact that this country is built by these 2 great individuals, spiritual father and the constructive father of India, Jawaharlal ji and Gandhi ji. Now my doubts were like this, so I'll put that doubt. Now if this is a federal country, we have had 2 federal systems in the world. One federal system is the federal system which is operative in the United States of America. In the USA, the states have got their own laws, they have got their own judiciary, and they have got their own political systems except for the presidential election. Now the issue is this way. We have so many problems, like the Uniform Civil Code coming up. Now the Uniform Civil Code, the impression given all over India is that all over the world there is a Uniform Civil Code in every country. There is no Uniform Civil Code. Sir, you can correct me. If you want the age of marriage in one state, let us say Maryland in the USA, is 16 years, while in another state, Arkansas, it may be 20 years or 21 years. Then they are also saying that why not the boy and the girl have the same marriageable age? So I'm just quoting one single thing to say that there is no Uniform Civil Code. anywhere in the world. Now, sir, now we will come to the issue of what happens if you try to bring in uniformity. It is our wrong impression that the United States of America has remained the United States of America. On the basis of the issue of federalism, even though for a bad cause, that is called the lost cause, for that the country split into the Confederacy, the Confederate States of USA and the Union of USA. And the Confederacy also was very strong, having more than 13 states with Robert E. Lee as their general and Jefferson Davis as the alternate president of USA. So America has split into two. So what does that mean? Just because you are federal does not mean you have the right to secede and go for a country. On the contrary, in the 90s, when the USSR split on the basis of glasnost and perestroika, we were under the impression that how can these states leave the USSR? But the USSR constitution very clearly stated that the 15 USSR republics, including the Islamic republics of Muslim republics of Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, etc., they could leave the USSR. So they left. So the USSR broke into so many parts. That is another federal system, sir. Now we have come to many of the, now we have a feeling that this is only in America and all. Now I'll give you an example. So many of you are, what should I say, Barcelona fans, especially because Messi was there. Barcelona, the football club Barcelona stands in favor of a separate country of Catalonia. The Real Madrid stands for a united Spain. And there is a big issue going on in Spain on that basis. Similarly, United Kingdom, you know that there was a referendum for Scotland and the score was 55-45. 55 said, no, we don't want to go from Scotland, from UK, we will remain with the UK. So these are all the diverse thinking processes over here. Why I am telling you these things are that we are beyond all this. We have a federal system which is with a strong center. But how strong? And how strong can they flex their muscles? That is the issue, sir. See, we have a strong federal system, but slowly it is being whittled down. And may I say with deep regret to Sri Shashi Tharoor ji, that during the emergency days, it proved that the Constitution of India can be torpedoed from within. One. Second thing, the subjects like education were changed from the state list to the concurrent list. Now we are suffering because of that. So now where are we heading as far as the federal state is concerned? Are we a federal? See Ponnaiyan, who was law minister in Tamil Nadu, was my close friend. So he used to say, don't tell central government Fasal, it is union government. So it is a union of India. It is not a central government of India, it is a union of India of various states. Now the various governors who are there, including our dear friend sitting in the Trivandrum Rajbhavan, they are challenging the federal system. So this is also an issue for us. Now sir, I don't want to steal much, I will put one more question to you. Do you think that there is any country in this world which is based on a theocratic state setup which is going to survive? If India is heading for a theocracy based on the Savarkarian or Golwarkarian thesis, then it is heading for disaster. I'll tell you why. It is heading for disaster because more than 20 Arab countries, Islam, Arab culture, language Arabic, they were not able to survive as one. There was an attempt to join Syria and Egypt together as the United Arab Republic that broke into pieces within a few years. So a country based on religion is not a possibility as far as any country in the world is concerned. And somehow some sort of this thing has been spread that the Muslim countries are all Islamists. It is not so. There are only 5 Islamic republics in the world, Islamic countries in the world. They are not democracies. They are all some sort of theocracies or monarchies, including the Salafi country of Saudi Arabia, the Shiite country of Iran and the military Sunni country of Pakistan. All the other countries are secular. So this is a wrong concept which you have got, that the Muslim countries are all Islamic republics. When Muhammad Ali Jinnah was asked by Maududi after independence whether this country is secular or not, he said it will never become an Islamic state. Then Maududi got up and abused him, and it was said that he was sent to jail for that. I don't know that story whether it's true or not. However, the issue is that before us, the issue is that is this country heading for a theocratic state? Now, I'll finally end my words, sir, saying that there is nothing in the Constitution of India, there is nothing in the governance of India which is against Hindu Hit. There is nothing. All Hindu interests are being taken care of in this country, including what is said in the directive principles regarding cow slaughter, etc., etc. I don't think there is anything going on in this country which is anti-Hindu. But unfortunately, somehow, pro-Muslim is being turned into anti-Hindu. I don't know how you turn it around. So that is the issue, being the function being organized by the Muslim Education Society. I have to add that word also. I have always felt that the Hindu interests are being well taken care of, even during the time of the now called the Beta Noir, that is Jawaharlal Nehru or Mahatma Gandhi. They always used to take care of Hindu interests, including the issues of reservation, cow slaughter, so many other things, including the building of the Somnath temple, etc., etc. I am not going into that much. The only thing, sir, I posed only 2 questions. You can say whatever you want or you want to speak, but 2 questions I wanted answers. One is that, is this going to remain a federal country, and is this going to remain a secular country? Thank you very much, sir, for attending our function. And Shashi ji was asking me whether he should speak in English or not, or in Malayalam. I said all the people over here understand English, and they would like to listen to your English, which is so sweet. See, they want the English speaking Shashi Tharoor. In politics, we can use the Hindi, Malayalam speaking Shashi Tharoor. Thank you, sir.
I now invite President of MES and Director of Medical College, Dr. P. Ghafoor, to officially welcome Sir to our program by giving them a bouquet of acceptance of gratitude from our side for attending our program. I also invite our aided school chairman, V.A. Hamsakoya, to please stage and state and give on behalf of MES. Please welcome, sir, on behalf of MES, aided school chairman, JNVU Hamsakoya. CBC school chairman, Dr. K.P. Abubakar. Self-Financing College chairman, Dr. Rahim Fazal. Construction committee chairman, Janab K.M. Abdul Salam. Dean of MES Medical College, Dr. Girish sir. Vice Principal of MES Medical College, Dr. Sheila Madam. And on behalf of Malappuram District, MES District Secretary Malappuram, Umar Gurkul sir.
I hope everyone is mine.
Engineering College Principal Rahmatul Nisa. Madam, please.
honored by the principal of the engineering college being a lady.
So we begin with our official program. Please be seated. Like our beloved director said, this is a chief guest which requires no introduction. But so today I'll be taking a different note on this. I'll be introducing the chief guest on behalf of all of us, the young generation and the students of campus of MES Medical College. Dr. Shashi Tharoor sir was born on March 9, 1956 in London, and he is a prominent Indian diplomat and politician. And he is serving a third term in the Lok Sabha from Trivandrum constituency. After almost 3 decades in the United Nations, serving also under Secretary Kofi Annan, who we all remember from our school days, he was the face of the United Nations for Indian citizens worldwide and spurred the dream of young Indians who wanted to represent India at the global stage. His young, spiriting image of speaking at the UN gave birth to many model United Nations across Indian college campuses. Mr. Tharoor, after his leadership race to the UN top post, would do a Garvapasi and then come back home to serve his people and his homeland. He contested from Trivandrum in 2009 to the parliamentary post and later went on to be appointed as Union Minister of External Affairs and as well as Union Minister of HRD during the UPA reign. His work in Trivandrum has revitalized the city and brought Trivandrum back to its glory days and uplifted it to a stature worthy of the state capital. He is a true reformist, secularist with ideas similar to the ones enshrined and cherished by the Muslim Educational Society. He has shared many platforms with MES in the past years and has constantly been an ally in MES's fight for progressive change for the community. He is truly a marvelous mixture of Gandhi's ideology and Nehruvian principles, recognizing the need for a secular, plural, progressive state in India and an inclusive state. He remains a strong vocal supporter for women's rights, their freedom of speech and their representation in politics, especially coming from a state where the women remain in majority. His progressive nature and the education of women and their employment align with the Muslim educational motto, Muslim Educational Society's motto of educate all, empower all. He is also the advocate for breaking the taboo of professionals in politics by giving birth to the Professional Congress and employing experts in solving the country's problems. His encouragement has brought forward a slew of young professional politicians, especially important in a country with the world's youngest population. He is one of the first few politicians who recognized the importance and power of social media in today's socio-political fabric and remains one of the most followed and loved politicians in all platforms, with others scampering up to catch up with him. He remains one of the most successful published authors with his recent books, The Battle of Belonging, Questioning the Directions of the Nation and Patriotism. And his book, An Era of Darkness, brings to light the impact of the British Empire, and he remains the one Indian that continues to shake up the British Empire even after independence. Hopefully his efforts end up in the return of the Kohinoor Diamond. He is one of the most sought after orator, constantly being the face of literature festivals, including the Kerala Literature Festival occurring this week in Kozhikode. His presence in youth conclaves remain an informative treasure trove for today's tech-savvy youth. He is a master in the arts of vocabulary, where his pronunciations and his usage of English vocabulary has flummoxed Mallus and flooded WhatsApp groups of our parents. No one would dare challenge him to a game of Scrabble other than our beloved director perhaps. It is an astonishment that the MES State President and beloved Tharoor sir shares so many hobbies and common grounds, where the constant question remains, how do they manage time for all such activities? His political slogan, Think Tharoor, Think Tomorrow, resonates like Obama's Yes We Can. His followers refer to them as Tharoorians, perhaps an ode to the Gandhians and Nehruvians. Today, MES Medical College welcomes you, sir, to our humble campus of more than 2,000 students of medical, dental, paramedical, nursing, arts, and even a school. And today, we are ready to think Tharoor, think tomorrow. Welcome, sir. Now I invite you for the official inaugural address.
Thank you very much, Hamid Fazal, for that wonderful and generous introduction. I must say that it's amazing to see this huge audience assembled in this Maidan here today. And I thank you all for coming, and even more for having to wait. I'm afraid it took me much longer to get here than we had planned, and my apologies to all of you who've had to stay long. I hope to make up for that in a certain amount of focused and concise brevity on the important issues before us today. So our dear President, my friend, Dr. P.A. Fazal Ghafoor, Dr. Hamid Fazal, Mr. O.C. Muhammad Salahuddin, Mr. K.K. Kunju Moideen, other distinguished figures on the dais, in the audience, and of course, my dear Sahodri Sahodaranmare, Ellavarkkum ende Vinidamaya Namaskaram. Since Dr. Fazal Ghafoor himself spoke on these challenges in English, it would be easier. But you know, I was going to raise a number of different perspectives on the Constitution. But before that, I would like to pay a brief tribute to Dr. P.K. Abdul Ghafoor himself, whose 40th Charama Varshika we are looking at today. It's a sad occasion when you realize how much this great gentleman accomplished in such a short span of time. When you realize that he passed away of a heart attack while examining a patient, so on the job as a doctor, at the age of just 53. And for me, I had a special feeling about this because he was exactly 1 week younger than my own father, was born the same month of the same year, and I lost my father at what I thought was too young an age at 63, 10 years later. So when I see that my friend Fazal had to suffer this very sad bereavement of losing your father at the age of 53, my heart goes out to him. But what a lot he packed into such a brief life. This is a man who has acquired distinguished medical qualifications, somebody who went and became first a member, then a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians in England, a very prestigious medical qualification, somebody who taught as a professor at some of the most impressive medical colleges of our state, who then resigned his responsibilities in government service to take on the task of building up the MES from next to nothing to a point where the Muslim Education Society in Dr. Abdul Ghafoor's own lifetime became an immense nationwide organization with branches everywhere and a large umbrella covering 150 institutions, including no fewer than 35 colleges and I think 70 odd schools. It's an astonishing achievement. And to think that so much was done by such a young man makes us keep thinking, what more might he have accomplished had he been able to live the full life that so many of us look forward to these days at a time of medical advances. But I'm sure that Fazal feels that his father died as he lived in service of humanity, in working for people. He was literally examining a patient when he passed away. And today we must all bow our heads in respect for his memory. Let us remember Dr. Fazal Ghafoor for a brief moment of silence. I'm sorry, Dr. Abdul Ghafoor, I beg your pardon. But let us remember what the young Fazal Ghafoor would have had to go through in losing his father at that time. All right, let's turn to but you can see why Fazal Ghafoor was on my mind, because he said a few very interesting things in his own remarks and threw me a couple of interesting challenges. I had come with some other thoughts prepared, but I think the challenges he threw me are far more interesting. When you look at the two particular issues of the Indian Constitution that he raised, they're not the only ones, and I'm going to start by trying to situate the Constitution in a broader context, and then I will respond specifically to the two challenges that Dr. Fazal Ghafoor threw before us. The first one is, think of when the Constitution was written. It was written when the country was being torn apart by partition. The British were about to leave, their departure was imminent, but the flames of violence, of communal carnage were burning across the land. And at that time, the Constituent Assembly was sitting in what is soon going to stop being our parliament, and a new parliament is being built by this government. But in that Constituent Assembly, you had a large cross-section of Indian opinion debating what kind of country our India was going to be. And what to my mind was absolutely striking about this was that at one point there was a whole debate about whether the Constituent Assembly should even meet and discuss in the absence of the Muslim League members who were boycotting the Constituent Assembly in pursuance of their demand for a separate state of Pakistan. And a number of prominent Hindus, including Dr. Ambedkar, actually said we should not meet, we should not discuss, because we should all go along together. It was only when partition became a fait accompli and it was very clear that Pakistan was going to be created after the government, the British Raj, announced that decision. Only then did the Constituent Assembly start its serious deliberations in 1946 on the future of the country. So that is the background under which this constitution was being prepared. And at that time, Jawaharlal Nehru spoke in the Constituent Assembly and said that he trembled with expectation as to what would be happening in the Constituent Assembly, because it was a moment of great transition for India, when India was going to go from the old to the new, a time when all sorts of changes were going to become possible. And what is striking at that time was that we had a very distinguished but somewhat elite assembly. These were people who had come through the elections of 1946, when the British had conducted elections with a very limited franchise. The population of India at that time was 300 million, but only 30 million were eligible to vote. There were a lot of property qualifications, educational qualifications. So the people who were not the kind of people who are there today in the parliament, who represent a much greater depth of Indian public and Indian public opinion. In those days, it was people from a certain stratum of society, a lot of lawyers, a lot of grand and important people. But because they were inspired by the freedom movement, they were caught up in a discussion that was infused with principles and a great vision to build our country through this constitution that would serve such a large mass of humanity for a long time to come. Now, one of the key issues that had to be discussed was indeed, as Dr. Fazal Ghafoor says, the question of secularism. And that was fundamental to the founding of the Republic, because the country had been divided in the name of religion. Let's recall that India was indeed partitioned, not as some other countries in the next few years would be partitioned. In the 1950s, you saw the creation of East and West Germany, North and South Korea, North and South Vietnam. And it was always either geography or ideology, or a combination of geography and ideology. That was not the case in India. It was not geography. It wasn't that North India went one way and South India went another. It was not ideology. It wasn't as if Marxists went one way and capitalists went another, or communists went one way and capitalists went another. No. The issue on which the country was partitioned was just one issue. And that issue was the question of, will religion be the determinant of our nationhood? Those who believed that their religion determined their identity, they wanted to create Pakistan in the name of their religion, and as a result, they divided the country. But those who remained explicitly rejected the argument, the so-called two-nation theory, on the basis of which India was divided. In fact, you would be not surprised to know that some people did raise the issue in the Constituent Assembly. They said, now that Pakistan has been created as a Muslim state, should we not make India into a Hindu state? And there was a lively discussion on this in the Constituent Assembly, but overwhelmingly, over 90% of the Assembly said no. Ours must be a country for all. Our freedom struggle was for all, and the country we build through this Constitution must be for all. So the basic message is, whatever your religion, your caste, your color, your language, whatever the region of the country where you were born, once you were a citizen of India under this Constitution, you were equal, you had the same rights as everyone else, and that was a very important principle that had to be affirmed. Today there is an unnecessary political controversy stirred up by those who are in power in our country around the fact that the word secular was not in the Constitution when it was approved in 1950. It was added 26 years later by the 42nd Amendment passed during the emergency of Indira Gandhi, when she added the words both secular and socialist to the Constitution. And so people are saying, why don't we take those words out, because our Constitution was not meant to be secular. I would say respectfully, they are wrong. They are wrong because even without the word secular, it was a secular constitution. A constitution that grants every citizen the freedom of worship, that grants every citizen the freedom of religion, the freedom to propagate one's religion, and the freedom of opinion to agree or dissent from anything, including religion. That is by definition a secular constitution. So if our dear friends who are in power today remove the word secular, I can assure you the Indian Constitution cannot cease to be secular. And then on top of that, there is one more concept that upholds our secularism, and that is the doctrine propounded by the Supreme Court justices way back in the 1970s in the Keshavananda Bharati case, the doctrine of the basic structure of the Constitution. They said you can amend anything you like, but you cannot alter the basic structure of the Constitution. Which means you cannot change India from a democracy by amendment. You cannot change India from a secular country by amendment. You cannot change India from a federal country by amendment, because that would be a violation of the basic structure. So this has put us in a situation where, though Dr. Fazal Ghafoor's concerns are justified, and I'll explain why in a minute, the constitutional position is that there is nothing to fear. But you know, it's very interesting that Dr. Ambedkar, who was chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution, famously said that a constitution is only as good as the people who run it, and that a good constitution can be really wrecked and messed up by bad people, and a bad constitution can be made good by good people. And that is a fact that, as he pointed out in the Constituent Assembly, is inescapable. What we are seeing today is not an erosion of secularism by constitutional amendment, but rather an erosion of secularism by politics. And that is something where I would have to say I appreciate the concerns expressed by Fazal Ghafoor. What is the issue here? The issue here is that just as this government has learned that it should not proclaim an emergency because the emergency was deeply unpopular and resulted in an electoral defeat for the government that had declared an emergency, but that you can achieve the same results without declaring an emergency. So you can actually intimidate the press, you can stifle dissenting voices, you can invoke sedition laws, you can actually put people behind bars, you can demolish homes and shops by bulldozers, and no one can stop you doing any of those things. And you can change and tighten the UAPA, the Unlawful Activities Protection Act, in such a way that you can declare anybody a terrorist, and what is more, you then don't have to bring him to trial and he cannot get bail. That you can do all this without amending the Constitution, then why bother to amend the Constitution? That, I think, is where Fazal Ghafoor's concerns must be paid attention to. So all of these things are happening in our country. That is a result of politics. But whereas the Constitution is not easy to amend in the terms of its basic structure, in politics there is always an answer. And the answer is at the ballot box. The answer is your vote. Political change is the answer for a political doctrine that you do not agree with. Now, the second challenge that Fazal Ghafoor mentioned was the question of our federalism. Are we a federal state? And this is a very vexed question because, as he mentioned from his friend, the law minister in Tamil Nadu, the Tamils in particular have a very strong view that India is a union of states and that as a result, the union government, the federal government, should have no special powers to override the states. The problem, unfortunately, is that those who wrote the Constitution did not write a fully federal constitution. They wrote a constitution that has been described by foreign constitutional experts as quasi-federal, that is partly federal. In what respects is it federal? Well, we have states, we call ourselves a union of states. The states were reorganized 6 years after the Constitution was adopted on linguistic lines. But let me show you a few ways in which we are not the same as the United States that Fazal mentioned when he talked about a common civil code. Because in the United States, it is genuinely a union of states where each state has an existence of its own and came together to create the union. In India, the union came first and created the states. So the states in our present borders in 1956 were created by the union government. When you look at the fact that the national parliament, not the constituent assembly, was able to create states then and has created more states since. In 2000, as you know, Jharkhand was carved out of Bihar, Chhattisgarh was carved out of Madhya Pradesh by the union parliament. So you cannot therefore claim, as the Americans can, that the states together have created the union. The other problem is that the Constitution provides for the central government to oversee the states in significant ways. The institution of the governor is a very curious idea. Fazal Ghafoor has mentioned that in the context of the troubles that the Tamil Nadu is having with its governor. There are challenges for our present Kerala government, disagreements with the governor here. There were previously serious quarrels between the governor of West Bengal and the government of Mamata Banerjee. So you're seeing there have been a number of, and more recently in Maharashtra, between the governor of Maharashtra, Bhagat Singh Koshyari, and the then opposition-led government of the MVA, that is the Shiv Sena, the NCP and the Congress. And there were quarrels and clashes all the time. Because the governor is appointed by the central or union government without necessarily having to consult the state government or seek its opinion or its approval. And therefore, the governor comes with an authority that is derived entirely from the national capital and the national government, not from the states. And the governor still has to perform all the ceremonial functions, including appointing or dismissing the chief minister, calling or proroguing the legislative assembly. All of these things are done by the governor appointed by Delhi. And so you're seeing a situation where we have preserved a very curious fiction that the governor is the head of the state, just as the president is the head of our nation. Whereas we all know that at the national level, the real power is exercised by the Prime Minister. And when the President speaks to Parliament, he can only read out a speech written for him by the Prime Minister's government and approved by the government. When the Governor today was asked to read, not today, 2 days ago, was asked to read a speech in the Tamil Nadu Assembly, to actually lay out the program of the government, he did not like some of the language in that speech and he refused to read it. And instead he said something else which was not in the text. Whereupon the government passed a resolution saying that the only authentic version of the speech was a speech approved by the government of Tamil Nadu, and the governor walked out. Now here is a classic case where the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, the letter of the Constitution and the spirit of the Constitution, go in two different directions. The spirit of the Constitution respects a certain level of parliamentary convention, where, as I said, the governor is expected to follow the line of the government. But when the governor chooses not to, on the letter of the Constitution, he has the right. It's supposed to be the governor's speech, even though we all know it's supposed to be at the same time the government that writes the speech. This has raised some very serious constitutional questions that need to be addressed. In my view, it has also raised even the question of whether we need a governor at all. But that's where the whole debate between the power of the federal government and the power of the state government comes up. And I can tell you that I'm sure that no federal government would very likely be willing to end the existence of the governor. When you think about the formal roles of the governor, there is no role the governor is performing today that cannot be performed by somebody else. The Chief Justice of the Court, for example. But if the Chief Justice of the State High Court were to swear in the Chief Minister, that establishes them as two separate branches of government, but would seem to put the judiciary on a slightly higher plane. Nonetheless, in the United States, that's what happened. The Chief Justice of the US Supreme Court swears in the President of America. So one could argue that there is no reason to have a governor being sent from Delhi who has the right to appoint the Chief Minister. Let the appointment come from the votes of the people, instruct the assembly elected after the vote to elect a Chief Minister and swear that person in with the Chief Justice. And that's one possible answer. And a lot of the ceremonial functions can be performed by all sorts of ministers and Chief Minister himself, rather than having a governor with all the privileges there. It's not an argument that I'm advancing as the only possible course of action, but I'm saying it's a legitimate question to ask whether we actually need a governor at all in any of the states. Now, that's on the question of federalism. There's much more to be said because we've had various ups and downs. You've had, for example, the question of the GST, which actually has in some ways diluted the taxation powers of the states, because it's a nationwide tax agreed by a nationwide council on which the state's finance ministers are represented, but where the overwhelming power lies with the central government. So federalism being gradually eroded is true, but the elements for that are in the Constitution. For example, Article 356 of the Constitution allows the government in Delhi to dismiss a state government. They can say, for example, law and order is not being maintained, and put the state government under president's rule. We've seen that a few years ago in Kashmir. In the old days, we saw it very often in many states, most famously and for the first time in Kerala in 1959, after the Vimochana Samaram, there was a decision made to dismiss the state government of Kerala. So when you look at all this, it is very clear that ours is a quasi-federal system and not a fully federal system, because the balance is tilted very strongly towards the central or union government. Now, there's a conversation we can have forever, but we don't have time. Let me move on. In addition to the two issues Fazal Ghafoor raised, I want to mention a couple of perspectives on the Constitution in addition to that before I wind up. The first point worth making is that one of the most significant developments in the Constitution was the expansion of Indian democracy. And that is, as I mentioned to you, only 10% of the population was actually eligible to vote in the 1946 election on the grounds of property and education. But our constitution very far-seeingly granted the right of universal franchise to every citizen of India above the age of 21 at that time, and subsequent to an amendment brought by Rajiv Gandhi, it's now above the age of 18. Whether you are educated or not, whether you own property or not, you have a stake in this country and you have the right to vote. That was an astonishing decision when you realize that the British left us with a literacy rate of just 16%. Our country was just 16% literate. Here in Kerala, we're used to 96%. Isn't it shocking to realize that just a few generations ago, 75 years ago in 1947, that we had just 16% literacy? And yet, our leaders said we have fought the freedom struggle in the name of all our people. Everyone must have a right to determine their future. That was an amazing thing. A second perspective is that not only was democracy deepened in that exercise, but there was a very important shift between the British idea of ruling India through communities to the Ambedkar and Nehruvian idea of ruling through of giving individual citizens agency and empowerment under the Constitution. What do I mean? For the British, communities had rights. So, for example, Muslims were part of an electorate where only Muslim voters were included and they could only vote for Muslim candidates. Christians, the same thing, and this was the sort of division, and the Hindus were in a sort of general electorate where they could vote. Now, why was this done? Because the British believed in divide and rule. But they also believed in all sorts of other things that created a sense of separate identity on the basis of religion. And why this was done was for imperial purposes, but it was also a way of keeping communities limited, because if every individual was a rights-bearing citizen, that individual could also start rising up more easily to defend his or her autonomy and agency as an individual and challenge imperial rule, whereas in a community, that person would be expected to stand up only for his community. Why did this happen? Because the British were horrified by what they saw in 1857, when Hindu and Muslim soldiers fought side by side under the banner of the Mughal monarch, Bahadur Shah Zafar, in order to overthrow the British Raj. And though the British quelled that so-called mutiny, which really was the first Indian revolt, though they quelled that revolt in a very brutal and bloody suppression that took more than a year and a half, nonetheless, they learned from that the lesson that if you allow Hindu-Muslim unity or unity of communities again, then our rule would be under threat. So what the Constituent Assembly did, Ambedkar and Nehru and all the others, was to say, no, we will insist that the individual has autonomy and agency. The individual citizen has rights. And those rights include the right to vote, but also the right to dissent from their communities. And that's also very important. So if you look at the way the Constitution has been framed, it was also an act of educating people in their own rights. People were to discover through the Constitution their right to acquire, if you like, their sense of their own political destiny and their own legal personality within our democracy. Now, the expansion of democracy that I spoke about also involved an expansion of rights. So what did you see, for example, as recently as the UPA government of 2004 to 14? You saw the creation of a rights-based framework, the Right to Information Act, the right to education, the right to employment, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, the right even to food through the Food Security Act, and from the point of view of farmers, the right to land as well from the Land Acquisition Act. All of these things are means of enhancing and deepening a notion of rights inherent in the Constitution when they had reached a level of ripeness that they could further be expanded for all of us. And a final thought on the Constitution that I should leave for you is that it's also been amended 103 times, which may seem as if it's a weakness of the Constitution. After all, in the United States, they've been a democracy for much longer than us. Since 1789, they adopted their Constitution, and yet they have barely got 22 or 23 amendments. Whereas we in India have 103 amendments in just 75 years, and they've got 23 in 250 years. But the truth is, rather than it being an admission of weakness, I think we could argue it is a sign of the Constitution's inherent strength, because our founding fathers and mothers realized that a Constitution must be flexible enough to adapt to changing realities and changing times. And so, because India was going to go through changes that they could not foresee in the late 1940s, they did not make it too difficult to amend the Constitution when necessary, but as the Supreme Court will say, within the basic structure concept, to take things into a greater freedom. And the Supreme Court, in a series of judgments, has dramatically expanded women's rights, welfare provisions, and upheld the constitutionality of laws and amendments which have gone ahead and deepened the rights and hopes of some of our most disadvantaged and marginalized sections. There is, as I said, still the question of the spirit in which the Constitution is implemented. Our Constitution says that Parliament consists of the President and the MPs. Doesn't mention the Prime Minister there. But when the Bhumi Puja was to be done for the new Parliament building, it was the Prime Minister who conducted it, and there was no sign of the President. We are still a secular state, even by name, even though they haven't removed that name yet. But when the Ayodhya temple was to be built, the first puja was again conducted by our Prime Minister. These are all very clear signs of what the government would like to think of as the ruling party's wish to move India towards a Hindu Rashtra. That would certainly be a violation of the basic structure, which is why they have not tried to do it through an amendment. They've just tried to do it in practice. But this is where it becomes imperative for us to resist practices which essentially undermine the fundamental nature and spirit of the Constitution we have. The Constitution as an instrument for social change is what Dr. Ambedkar talked about when he said that we have a top dressing of democracy on the soil of a society that is fundamentally undemocratic. And he said, what did he say? He said that we have in the Constitution one person, one vote. But in our society, we don't have one person, one value. By which he meant, if you are from a Dalit community, you are not given the same value in society as somebody who, let's say, is a Brahmin. Or a rich person has a different value from that of a poor person. Today, the worry is that if you demonize an entire community on the basis of their religion, that you again change the constitutional value of one person, one value. To my mind, we must stand up for an idea of India where everyone is equal, an idea in which everyone has a value that is indistinguishable from the next citizens, where it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, if you're a Muslim or a Hindu, if you're a Keralite or a Bengali or from UP, none of these factors, if you speak Hindi or you speak Tamil, none of these things should make a difference, because the Constitution ensures that it cannot make a legal and constitutional difference, and that every citizen, and under all these labels, has the same rights in our society. That, to my mind, is the idea of India that is embedded in our Constitution. It is an idea that is well worth fighting for in our democratic politics, in our universities, in our classrooms, and in a society like ours here in Kerala, which has thrived on diversity, on pluralism, and on a consciousness that we as citizens of this proud country have rights that we can stand up for, that we can affirm, and rights that no one, no government can take away. Dr. Ambedkar actually said, let us remember that all majorities are temporary. He said this in a famous speech he delivered when the Constitution had finally been agreed in November 1949. He said, all majorities are temporary. Let not the majority think that theirs is a permanent majority. Every Indian citizen has rights, every minority has rights that cannot be taken away by the majority, because the majority is by definition temporary. That is a lesson we must remind some people of in Delhi. Let us remember that if we need to remind them, it's not only through speeches and forums and arguments that we can do that. We also have the power of the ballot box, and that's only a year and a bit away. Thank you very much for listening to me. I thank you all once again in memory of Dr. Abdul Ghafoor for having me here on this very special occasion. Nandi Namaskaram. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. We now move on.
Now we have a interaction session with the students and teachers. People who would like to discuss any subject with Dr. Tharoor. Any subject, because I think he knows most of the subjects under the sun, except probably except scientific subjects. So they are requested to come forward.
Is there a mic going around? I mean, is there a mic you're going to give me?
Yeah.
Please tell me who you are, whether you're a student, what subject you're studying, etc. It'd be nice to know.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. Myself, Devika Google, studying second year BDS in MES Tyndall College. Second year BDS, sir. I'm a BDS student.
Great, go ahead. Please go ahead.
My question is, since the day we signed our Indian Constitution, we had underwent many changes and modifications in it. So out of my curiosity, if you're given a chance to amend or put forward a new law, which area would you give first priority?
Well, I think that there's a number of priorities we can do. In fact, we as MPs often put forward what is called private members' bills, where we suggest changes to laws. The government usually never accepts it, they don't go very far, but I have come up with a number of proposals through the form of draft laws. One law that I think should be a priority in our country is an anti-discrimination law. It should not be possible in a democracy like ours for someone to say, I will not rent my house to a Muslim, which is happening in some places in our country in northern India. It should not be possible to say, I will not admit to my college a homosexual. That should also be illegal. It should not be possible to say that somebody who has perhaps gone through a sex change operation will not be given a government job. It should not be possible to say that a disabled person will not be given access to every building that is providing taxpayer services as government buildings have to. So all of these things can be covered through an anti-discrimination law of the kind that you have in many Western democracies, but we don't yet have in this country. So that's one example. But I've come up with many others. I've come up with a suggestion that we should have a law to protect the rights of domestic workers, the often neglected segment of our society. I've also come up with a private member's bill saying that every state's capital that does not host a high court should at least have a bench of a high court. And I think you know why I'm doing that as the MP for Thiruvananthapuram.
Thank you, sir.
There is a microphone right in the audience. Anyone who wants to ask, you can come up and line up behind. To save time, why don't those who want to ask questions come up and line up behind the judge?
Good evening, sir. Myself, Abdul from Thiruvananthapuram.
Hello.
Good morning. Then I am a second year MBBS student in MES Medical College.
MBBS, right.
So you have partially answered few parts of my question, but still I would like to go forward with
Okay.
it. So my question is, reviewing the greater picture of India, it is evident that the insecurity of minorities have been increasing over time, especially in the past few years. So I would like, is it the failure of the basic structure of the constitution, considering the present political scenario? Also, as a person with years of experience in social service, how would you want the minorities to act in such a situation where even the judicial system seems to be compromised?
No, I would say that it's not a failure of the constitution, it's a failure of the political process that has given us a government that can do some of these things. And I do believe that the judiciary could have been a little more assertive when cases were brought before it. To give you one example, the Citizenship Amendment Act, for the first time introduced an acid test of religion in determining fast-track citizenship, where they said if you are a refugee from any neighboring country, provided you are not Muslim, then you are eligible for fast-track citizenship. That violates a cardinal principle of the Constitution in my view, and we should have challenged it constitutionally, and perhaps the court should have heard these cases much sooner. But be that as it may, we were challenging it in the streets. There were rallies in every city. I myself inaugurated 7 here. I spoke to the ladies of Shaheen Bagh in Delhi. There was a tremendous resistance against what was being done to the Constitution. And the argument was precisely this: you are not just attacking me because I'm a Muslim, you are attacking me as an Indian. I have the rights that every Indian has. How can you say that Muslims will have different rights from anyone else? And that, I thought, was a very strong protest. So the short answer to your question is, the best challenge to political decision making is political opposition. So we need to try and get a political answer through the ballot box and through people who have the courage to stand up for themselves and their rights.
But, sir, nowadays the news reports suggest that even the election results seems to be corrupted. So what I am asking is isn't it the demerit of the Constitution to limit, because it isn't able to limit the present political scenario or the present government?
I don't think, as Ambedkar said, there is no such thing as a perfect constitution. Every constitution depends on how well it's operated. The same constitution was able to work reasonably well without any of these dangers for a long time. Suddenly we have a government that is able to change the way in which it implements its constitution because it has a particular party and an ideology going with that party, which is at issue here. But I think honestly it's a political issue and not so much a constitutional issue, other than the fact that the judiciary should stand up a little more firmly for the exercise of constitutional rights.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, I want to ask you a question. It is as per the activities of the central ministry, and India is...
Little closer, I'm not hearing you very well.
Okay. As per the activity of our present central ministry, we are losing our secular face. And Congress is always a party which put forward a secular face in India and nationwide. You are an eminent person, eminent writer. You have lots of experience, international, national politics, etc. Yesterday we have heard a statement that you are ready to become the Chief Minister of Kerala, okay?
I didn't say
and
that.
how you limit yourself to Kerala, because Kerala doesn't lose its secular face so far, and India needs you. Then how you limit yourself to Kerala? How you focus on Kerala?
You're very, very kind. Thank you. Look, I have been serving internationally and nationally in all my career. Having come here, I've been told I should continue, but I thought prayer was going on. So the short answer is that though I've had that kind of career, when people ask me, I can't say, no, I'm unprepared. So I said, I'm prepared. That's all. I actually also said, we already have a chief minister. He has a majority in this country, in this state, which is a very secure majority. There is no election since 2026. So why are we discussing this question today? I also said that. But the media doesn't like to report that. The media likes to report the headline-grabbing news, and then they can rush off and get their stories, their breaking news stories. That's all. I'm just saying I'm prepared to take on any responsibility that the people, the state, the party are prepared to give me. And if that is a responsibility offered, I'm not afraid of it. I'm quite willing to do it. But to my mind, you're right. There are very important national and international challenges also.
Good evening, sir. Myself Rega. I'm a second year BDS student. So, my question is, media is considered as the fourth pillar of democracy. But these days medias are spreading like fake news. Media's freedom of expression and freedom of speech Article 19A പ്രകാരം. പക്ഷേ നമുക്ക് എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഈ വ്യാജ പ്രചാരണങ്ങളൊക്കെ തടയുന്നതെന്ന് മീഡിയനെ കൺട്രോൾ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുക? കോൺസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷൻ വഴി എന്തെങ്കിലും അമെൻഡ്മെന്റ് ചെയ്ത് അത് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുമോ?
അല്ല, മീഡിയ കൺട്രോൾ ചെയ്ത് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ നമ്മുടെ ഫ്രീഡം ഓഫ് എക്സ്പ്രഷൻ എന്ത് പോയി? കോൺസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷനിൽ പറയുന്നത് ഫ്രീഡം ഓഫ് എക്സ്പ്രഷൻ ഉണ്ട് എന്നാണ്. അതിൻ്റെ അർത്ഥം എല്ലാവർക്കും ഒരു സ്വന്തം അഭിപ്രായം പറയാനും ഒരു പേപ്പർ സ്ഥാപിക്കാനും ഒരു ടെലിവിഷൻ ചാനൽ സ്ഥാപിക്കാനും എഴുതാനും ഒക്കെ അവകാശമുണ്ടല്ലോ. അപ്പോൾ അവർക്കത് ഉള്ളപ്പോൾ കൺട്രോൾ അല്ല വേണ്ടത്, നമ്മൾക്ക് കുറച്ചൊരു സെൽഫ് റെഗുലേഷൻ ചെയ്യാൻ നമ്മൾ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. അതും കൂടി അവർ നന്നായി ചെയ്യുന്നില്ലേ ഞാൻ സമ്മതിച്ചു. പക്ഷേ ഐ എം നോട്ട് ഇൻ ഫേവർ ഓഫ് കൺട്രോൾ, ബിക്കോസ് ആ മാധ്യമക്കാരുടെ കാരണമാണ് നമ്മൾക്കൊരു ഫ്രീ സൊസൈറ്റിയെ മെയിൻറ്റെയിൻ ചെയ്യാൻ സാധിക്കുന്നത്. Even today, when the so-called Godi media is very much supporting the government, there still is independent media online, websites and so on, which are giving a contrary point of view. And in Kerala, as you know, some parties have their own television channels, others have channels with a particular point of view. If you start bringing in controls, it will be control imposed by those who are in power, in other words, those who happen to have won an election. I think that would be a disaster. Sorry to see you like that. I've been through that condition just 2 weeks ago, so all the best.
Good evening. So I'm a house surgeon over here now. I've just finished my MBBS. So I had a question. You've already answered a certain part of it as such, but you said that in the case in which it was Kerala versus after 1979, the case in which the Supreme Court ruled out that the power for the amendment of the constitution is still present very much with the parliament, except prescribing to
basic structure. 1973.
Other than the basic structure. But there's nothing that defines inherently what the doctrine basic structure is, right? So you have certain things like fundamental rights of me as an Indian citizen, and everyone is afraid that we can no longer, practice these fundamental rights. It's very unclear as to what it states wherein what the doctrine basic structure is. And as long as you have a 2/3 majority within both the houses of parliament, you can pass any bill even in order to amend a fundamental right of the constitution. So shouldn't there be some way wherein we can protect, these basic fundamental rights, either by saying pass a vote unanimously in both houses of parliament, or if you have any other suggestion wherein you could clearly define what the inherent basic structure of the constitution is.
Right.
Because that's not clear. It's all in the hands of the judiciary. Right?
It is in the hands of the judiciary. That's why when certain constitutional amendments are passed, people have gone to the Supreme Court asking them to rule on the constitutionality.
Yes.
So that if the Supreme Court wants, it can say something is upheld because it is constitutional, or it can say that it is in violation of the basic structure of the Constitution.
As long as the judiciary keeps fluctuating and they are under certain stresses by, of course, whatever political party is currently in power, there is no inherent, shouldn't we have a definition?
But the problem is, you do understand that if you start defining it today, then the preferences and biases of today will be frozen for all time to come for future generations. Is that fair to them?
It's not, but at least the fundamental rights would.
Whereas if you have a judgment by today's court and a later generation feels it's unfair, they can go back to a new court and change it. So that flexibility is part of the strength of the Constitution. I would say that I think the Supreme Court very deliberately left these things undefined. So lawyers will disagree as to what constitutes the basic structure. But the final answer is always the judges who are on the bench at that particular time when a case comes up. So recently we had the economically weaker sections reservation of the forward caste. So that 10% reservation for them, some people said it's unconstitutional. They went to the Supreme Court ruled 4-1 that it is constitutional. You could have a judge saying it violates the basic structure, which is what the argument was by the lawyers who opposed it. But the judges took another stand. Who knows, maybe 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, there could be a different judgment. But the truth is that that shows the flexibility of the Constitution to keep up with changing times and preferences.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good luck with getting your foot back in shape. I hope it's nothing too long-lasting.
Good evening, sir.
Good
Myself, Irfana Latif, and I'm from second year BSc MLT. So my question is, sir, there have been a drastic change from scientific institutions to religious institutions. So what's your opinion about that, and how it affect the future?
No, I mean, when you say drastic change, do you mean that the religious institutions have become more religious, or that non-religious institutions have become religious?
Our scientific institutions become more religious.
Well, I think that's not so much religion as a sort of unfortunate cultural nationalism that's crept in. A very good example is the Indian Science Congress, which used to be completely about scientific temper and pure science, and today, or in recent years, has been dominated by people who are presenting papers about flying jets in the Vedas and all sorts of, preposterous ideas which have no basis in science. But don't forget that that is not taken seriously by scientists or professionals. They see this as part of the politicization of our processes in our country. But everyone knows that for India to actually succeed in terms of science, technology, and international respect for our competence in these fields, we'll have to move away from these cranks and focus on what we can actually achieve in the real world in terms of measurable, provable hypotheses and results. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. My name is Aisha MK. I'm a first year MBBS student from MES Medical College.
First year. Good luck.
Sir, my question is, as a politician with no political background and no political family backup, you have to go through a lot of challenges and controversies on your own. So how did you keep up your mental strength throughout all these? And even after all these controversies, how do you still remain as a #1 icon for the youth, including me, sir?
Well, that the youth will have to tell me. Thank you so much. But on the first part of your question, I can say that, it's a very difficult thing to do, because you cannot control what people say about you or do to you, but you can control how you react to what they say about you. And that control of your own reaction is so indispensable. The British have this expression of grace under pressure. That is, it's when you're under pressure, often under unfair pressure, that you have to show grace. And that's very difficult to do in practice, because we're all human beings. We hurt, we want to lash out. Sometimes the criticisms, unfairness. I've been the victim of completely unjustified and false allegations in my personal life, and I've had to see this nonsense in the newspapers and on television channels. But if I were to crack under the strain, that would have been far more damaging for me. Now, there was a bit of advice given to me by my old boss, the Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan, when he was attacked very unfairly for some things that he had not really been guilty of in the UN. And he told me that his own father, who was a wise old man in Ghana, in Africa, had taught him a proverb. And he said the proverb is, when the sharks bite you, do not bleed. I couldn't understand it. I said, what do you mean, when the sharks bite you? Of course you'll bleed. Kofi said, one day the time will come, you'll understand what I mean. And sure enough, the time came when I was being bitten by all sorts of sharks that I understood the meaning. If you bleed, you give the sharks the satisfaction that they have hurt you and damaged you. If you do not show your pain, if you focus on yourself, you know the truth, you know who you are, you have a clean conscience, you just go ahead and do your own thing, undeterred by their falseness, then you will succeed. And that's the way in which I was able to cope. I wrote my articles, made my speeches, spoke in parliament, spoke around the world, went to universities, and I just refused to pay attention to the lies until finally the lies started collapsing of their own falsehoods, and I stayed without having damaged myself by trying to refute or argue with these nasty people.
Thanks a lot, sir. I'll try to take these advices to my life.
You must. All the best to you, my
Thank you,
dear.
sir.
Good luck.
Sir, എൻ്റെ പേര് മുഹമ്മദ് യാസിൻ. ഞാൻ ഫസ്റ്റ് ഇയർ BBA സ്റ്റുഡൻ്റ് ആണ്.
ഫസ്റ്റ് ഇയർ എന്താണ്?
BBA സ്റ്റുഡൻറ്റ്.
BBA, ബിസിനസ് അഡ്മിനിസ്ട്രേഷൻ.
ഭരണഘടന സംരക്ഷിക്കേണ്ട ആളുകൾ തന്നെ അതിൻ്റെ ദംശനങ്ങൾ കണ്ടാൽ ഒരു പൗരൻ എന്ന നിലക്ക് ഭരണഘടന സംരക്ഷിക്കേണ്ട ബാധ്യത നമുക്കുണ്ട്. നാം അതിനുവേണ്ടി എന്താണ് ചെയ്യേണ്ടത്?
ഭരണം സംരക്ഷിക്കാനോ? നമ്മുടെ ജനാധിപത്യത്തിൽ ഒരൊറ്റ മാർഗമേ ഉള്ളൂ, അത് വോട്ട് ചെയ്യിക്കണം. വോട്ട് കിട്ടിയാലേ ഭരണം സംരക്ഷിക്കാൻ സാധിക്കുള്ളൂ. കോൺസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷനലി നമുക്കറിയാം, ഭരണഘടന അനുസരിച്ചിട്ട് ലോയർമാർക്കും ജഡ്ജിമാർക്കും പല കാര്യങ്ങൾ ചെയ്യാൻ സാധിക്കും. പക്ഷേ അത് നടക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. ചിലർ പറയുന്നു നടക്കുന്നത് പോരാ, ചിലർ പറയുന്നു ചില ജഡ്ജസ് എടുക്കുന്ന തീരുമാനങ്ങൾ സർക്കാരിനെ കൂടുതൽ സഹായിക്കുന്നു. ഒരു ഉദാഹരണമാണ് അയോധ്യ ജഡ്ജ്മെൻറ്റ് വന്നപ്പോൾ പലരും പറഞ്ഞു ഒരു മസ്ജിദിനെ പൊളിച്ച ആൾക്കാർക്ക് ഒരു പണിഷ്മെൻ്റ് ഇല്ല, എന്നിട്ട് ആ മസ്ജിദിനെ പൊളിച്ചവർക്ക് ആ സ്ഥലം കൊടുക്കുന്നു, എന്നിട്ട് ആ മറ്റേ ഈ മസ്ജിദ് നഷ്ടപ്പെട്ട സമുദായത്തിന് വേറൊരു സ്ഥലം 20 കിലോമീറ്റർ ദൂരത്ത് കൊടുത്തിട്ട് അവിടെ നിങ്ങൾ കെട്ടിക്കോളും മസ്ജിദ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ അത് ന്യായമാണോ എന്ന് ചോദിച്ചു. അപ്പോൾ ഇതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് നമുക്ക് രണ്ടഭിപ്രായം ഉണ്ടാവാം. പക്ഷേ ജഡ്ജിമാരെടുത്ത സ്റ്റാൻഡ് നോക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ അവരുടെ സ്റ്റാൻഡ് അനുസരിച്ചിട്ട് അവർ ചെയ്തത് ഒരു പക്ഷേ ഒരു ധൈര്യക്കുറവുണ്ടായിരുന്നു എന്ന് ആൾക്കാർക്ക് പറയാൻ സാധിക്കാം, ഇല്ലേ? അപ്പോൾ ഇതൊക്കെ നോക്കുമ്പോൾ എല്ലാം നമ്മൾ ജഡ്ജിമാരെയും പിന്നെ ലോയർമാരെയും മാത്രം ഡിപ്പെൻഡ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് എല്ലാം ചെയ്യാൻ സാധിക്കില്ല. ചില വിഷയത്തിൽ നമുക്ക് തന്നെ രാഷ്ട്രീയ രീതിയിലും വോട്ട് ചെയ്തിട്ടും നമ്മുടെ ഭരണഘടനയെ രക്ഷിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് മാറ്റങ്ങൾ കൊണ്ടുവരേണ്ടി വരും. അതാണ് എൻ്റെ ഷോർട്ട് ആൻസർ.
താങ്ക് യു സർ.
Good evening, sir. My name is Fatima Linsha and I'm a second year MBBS student at MES Medical College. So my question is, we know that in our nation, the unemployment is rising, the economy is falling, farmers are committing suicide, there is tax terrorism and price hacks. And despite of all these, the government is being insensitive to all these and still they are winning the election again. So whose fault do you think it is? Is it the people or the failure of the opposite party or the democracy itself because of many loopholes in it?
No, one can't say all of the above because I think democracy is democracy. We have chosen a system that has given us this result and now we are stuck with it. But there is some responsibility for the voters themselves and there's some responsibility for the political parties. Perhaps we were not efficiently or effectively enough organized. Perhaps we didn't come up with the right message. Perhaps we didn't campaign in the right way. Who knows? I'm proud that I won my own seat. But in a parliamentary system, unless a majority of my colleagues win their seats, it makes no difference in terms of forming a government or changing things. That is ultimately where we stand.
The objective of my question is that for a better future, for this unemployment and all, what can we do for the better future?
Well, on unemployment, of course, there's a mixture of factors. There's also the international factors. The globe is facing a recession. And unemployment is likely to go up in other countries also. You probably know, you're an MBBS student,
yes.
But in the IT field, for example, a lot of the big IT companies are laying off people. Facebook, Meta, Google, Twitter, all these companies have been laying off people in large numbers. That is essentially dismissing employees. So there is a challenge, and certainly in India, we are looking at a country where unemployment is at record levels. In 2021, we have the highest unemployment figures ever recorded. So clearly there has to be a greater emphasis on making it possible for investors to come in and create jobs. That's one thing we need to do. The second thing is when it comes to government jobs, our government has to be much more efficient in filling vacancies. There are so many vacancies in every state government, every central government, every PSU, railways, all of that. Those should be filled, and so on. But the scale of our country is so vast that you can't just wave a magic wand. We're not going to create employment just by changing the government on this one. I think we will have to work very hard on it. But some of the other challenges you've mentioned, yes, are a function of economic policies that have been chosen by the government of the day. Thank you. I'm sorry to say that we are running out of time. I won't be able to get to all the questions. We've taken a few. Why don't I take two more and then I'm really sorry we'll have to stop. Just these last two. Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening, sir. I'm Ria Fatima. I'm 22. I'm a daughter of Malappuram. And I'm a third year MBBS student. And
Hi.
it's such an honor to have you here. So just this past Friday on the 6th, the Supreme Court had transferred pending petitions on awaiting approval for same-sex marriage from high courts to itself. So I wanted to ask you, given your work around Section 377, how do you think that the vestigial colonial laws have influenced the progress of marriage equality in our country? And do you think 2023 would finally be the year that India wins marriage equality?
Wow, that's a really progressive question. I didn't expect to find it in Malappuram, but that's good. Let me say that yes, I did stand up for 377, and I was shouted down and outvoted twice by the BJP, because I believe that government has no place in the bedroom, government has no place in the kitchen either, or on the dining table. Government has no business telling an individual citizen of India whom they can love and what they should do. But there are different views on some of these things, and my own view is perhaps still a minority view. Now, the question of same-sex marriage has both emotional ramifications and personal ones, as well as, of course, legal implications. Right now, marriage is defined in terms of a man and a woman, and the government, when they decided not to object to the Supreme Court judgment on 377, said very clearly that they're not objecting does not imply that they're willing to agree to extending the rights of same-sex partners in any way, such as, for example, in same-sex marriage. So you can be sure that the government is going to oppose this tooth and nail. In terms of other political parties, very few have the courage to take a stand in favor. My thing is, we've got to be practical. Once you've permitted relationships between people of the same sex, it is inevitable that they should have certain rights towards each other. They're living together, they should have domestic partnership rights. What happens if one person in a partnership has a serious operation? Who signs the next of kin release when the doctors have to do it, right? So who signs the next of kin release? When you talk about a long-standing relationship between two people, one passes away, how does the property go? All of these things require some feasible arrangement. If there is a civil society objection to calling it marriage, then call it civil partnership or something legal and let them sign contracts. But it's a practical matter that needs to be addressed practically as well as legally.
Thank you, sir. I'm looking forward to seeing you at KLF.
All the best. Thank you, dear.
Good evening, one and all. Good evening, sir. I am Imran Amir Rahman, a first-year medical student of this college.
Hi.
Sir, നമുക്ക് എല്ലാവർക്കും അറിയാം ഇപ്പം ഇന്ത്യൻ പ്രസിഡന്റ് എന്നൊരു പദവി കേവലം പാഠപുസ്തകങ്ങളിലും മാധ്യമങ്ങളിലും മാത്രം ഒതുങ്ങിയിരിക്കുന്നു. To be very frank and with due respect, sir, I think that the Indian president is right now just a rubber stamp. Okay, so I think that ഏതൊരു രാത്രിയും ഏതൊരു ബില്ലും പാസ്സാക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് ഉണ്ടാവുന്നൊരു അത്രയും സിഗ്നിഫിക്കൻസ് ഇപ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് തോന്നുന്നുള്ളൂ. And landing to my question, sir, if the president of India were elected by the people instead of getting selected by the parties respectively, how better would the country be? And add on to that question, would you stand for the presidential position of the country if this was the scenario?
Don't let the media get one more headline tomorrow.
Yes,
but let me just say that certainly you may know, and if you don't, then please Google. You will see that I have written very strong views saying that India would be better off with the presidential system. In fact, interestingly enough, Dr. Ambedkar himself was in favor of that, but he was persuaded by the others that because the British had denied us a parliamentary system, therefore we as a country should be getting what the British have kept away from us, and we should therefore have a parliamentary system. And that's one of the challenges I think that we had to live with, is that we have been saddled with a system that works fine in a small island country like Britain, with now even only 60 million people, but which is completely unsuited to a country of our size. However, you must understand the implications of your question, which is that if we elect a president, then you have to answer a lot of other related questions. If you have an elected president, will you be able to guarantee the complete independence of the legislature? So you have three different independent branches, legislature, executive and judiciary, and the president is accountable to the legislature and does not control a parliamentary majority. That is something very important to ensure. I'm in favor of that. Similarly, what about the states? If you elect a president in Delhi, Why can't you elect directly the chief minister or governor in the states? So each state has an elected leader who is as powerful in that state as the president is nationally. And are you prepared to accept the implications of abandoning the parliamentary system and retaining a presidential one? That's the question. So those are the challenges we have to answer, but in principle I'm in favor.
Yeah, but sir, my add-on question, would you stand for the presidential
I
position?
don't want to answer that because I'm worried about our media friends.
Okay, sir.
I don't want to give them one more headline.
Sure.
But if there were such a system, I think I'm hearing voices from behind saying, of course you must. We'll see.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir. My name is Atif Mohammed Rafiq. I'm a third year MBA student. So my question is, in your opinion, what has been India's greatest accomplishment since independence? And also, what are you most looking forward to India develop as a nation in the coming decades?
Oh, that's too vast a question. There's so many accomplishments. Taking literacy from 16% to 82%, taking life expectancy from 27 to 70, taking infant mortality down, maternal mortality down. These are all amazing achievements. Winning the Cricket World Cup in '83 was a great achievement. So, I mean, you can pick your choice. Sending the mission to the Mars, which many developed countries have been trying to get an orbit around Mars, and they have failed repeatedly. But we in India were able to do it at our first attempt. And what is more, we did it cheaper than any other country. In fact, we're only 11% of the NASA budget for the same enterprise. In 11%, we were able to do something that only one or two countries in the world had attempted, and none of them had succeeded. All those who have succeeded in putting an orbiter in orbit around Mars have done so after more than one attempt. We're the only ones who did it in one. So there's so many things like this we can point to. What sort of changes for the future? Too much to be done. All I want is an India where every Indian citizen can count on 3 square meals a day, a roof over his or her head, a decent job and a possibility of improving their potential in life, a place where they can send their children to school for a proper education and to dream of a better future, and adequate health care within a short distance, let's say no more than 5 kilometers walk from their place of residence. If every Indian can take that for granted, I don't care whether you call us anything, I don't care whether China is doing 10 times better, it doesn't matter. It's just, I want Indians to lead a decent life in India.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sir, we really must stop soon, so this is the absolute maximum.
Sir, എൻ്റെ പേര് ഹിലാൽ സലീം, ഇവിടെ ഫസ്റ്റ് ഇയർ MBBS സ്റ്റുഡൻ്റ് ആണ്. എൻ്റെ ചോദ്യം, നമ്മൾ കഴിഞ്ഞ മാസങ്ങളിലൊക്കെ ഹിജാബ് ബാനുമായിട്ട് ഒരു വിഷയം വന്നിരുന്നു കർണാടകയിൽ. അപ്പോൾ ആ സമയത്ത് ചില സെക്യുലറിസ്റ്റുകൾ പറഞ്ഞൊരു കാര്യം, ഞങ്ങളിതിനെ സപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നു, അത് ആരെ ചെയ്യുന്നു എന്നുള്ളതല്ല, ഞങ്ങൾ സപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നു കാരണം ഇത് പിന്നെ മതത്തെ വിദ്യാലയങ്ങളിൽ നിന്ന് മാറ്റി നിർത്തുകയാണ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. അത് ഒരു വശത്ത് ഈ വെസ്റ്റേൺ അൾട്രാ ലിബറൽ ഏത്തിസ്റ്റിക് സെക്യുലറിസം നിൽക്കുമ്പോൾ മറുവശത്ത് ആൻറ്റി സെക്യുലറിസം തന്നെ ഒഴിവാക്കാൻ വേണ്ടി നടക്കുന്ന ആളാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ഈ ഇന്ത്യൻ സെക്യുലറിസത്തെ സാർ എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഡിഫൈൻ ചെയ്യുന്നത്? അത് ഒരു മതത്തെ ടോളറേറ്റ് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടുള്ള ആണോ? എങ്ങനെയാണ് അതിനെ ഡിഫൈൻ ചെയ്യാൻ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നത്?
അതെ, നോക്കൂ, നമ്മുടെ ഭരണഘടന പ്രകാരം എല്ലാവർക്കും അവർക്ക് സ്വന്തം അവകാശമുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ അഥവാ ഒരു മുസ്ലിം പെൺകുട്ടി ഹിജാബ് ഇടാൻ തീരുമാനിച്ചു, അവർക്ക് ആ അവകാശം ഉണ്ടാവണം. അഥവാ ഒരു മുസ്ലിം പെൺകുട്ടി ഞാൻ ഹിജാബ് ഇടില്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ അവർക്ക് ആ അവകാശം ഉണ്ടാവണം. അതാണ് നമ്മുടെ ഭരണഘടനത്തെ ശക്തി. മനസ്സിലായില്ലേ? അപ്പോൾ അതാണ് എൻ്റെ ലൈന്. ഞങ്ങൾ എപ്പോഴും അതാണ് പറയുന്നത്. യു ക്യാൻ ബി an Indian citizen with full rights. You can choose to conform to the dictates of your community, and you can choose not to conform. ഇനി നാളെ എല്ലാ മുസ്ലിമിനും താടി വളർത്തണം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എല്ലാവരും വളർത്തുക. ഇതല്ലേ നമ്മുടെ ജനാധിപത്യത്തിൻ്റെ ഭംഗി. They don't have to do that. They can decide whether they want to do it or not. Right? അതാണ് എൻ്റെ simple answer. And if you look throughout the country, ചില രാജ്യങ്ങളിൽ, ഫ്രാൻസിൽ there is a concept called laïcité. Laïcité എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ no visible appearances of religion. ഇപ്പം നിങ്ങളൊരു ഗവൺമെൻറ് സ്ഥാപനത്തിൽ കയറുമ്പോൾ ഒരു കുരിശ് നിങ്ങളുടെ കഴുത്തിലുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങളെ കയറ്റാൻ സമ്മതിക്കില്ല. ഒരു തലക്കെട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങളെ കയറ്റാൻ സമ്മതിക്കില്ല. ഒരു മുസ്ലിം ഹിജാബ് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങളെ കയറ്റാൻ സമ്മതിക്കില്ല. അതാണ് ഫ്രാൻസിൻ്റെ സിസ്റ്റം. നേരെ മറിച്ച് ഇന്ത്യയിലെ എല്ലാം ഇടാം. നമ്മൾ ഏത് ഇന്ത്യൻ നഗരത്തിൽ പോയി കണ്ടാലും ഹിജാബ് കാണാം, ബുർക്ക കാണാം, പിന്നെ മിനി സ്കേർട്ടും കാണാം, ഇല്ലേ, ജീൻസും കാണാം. ഇതെല്ലാം ഇടാൻ നമ്മൾ, അതാണ് ജനാധിപത്യത്തിൻ്റെ ഭംഗി. എൻ്റെ അഭിപ്രായത്തിൽ ആർക്കും ഇതിനെ ഇൻ്റർഫിയർ ചെയ്യരുത്. ലെറ്റ് എവരിവൺ ഡു എക്സാക്ട്ലി വാട്ട് ദേ വാണ്ട്. Thanks.
So we'll be winding up the Q&A session.
Okay, the last 2 girls and then we'll stop. Sorry for the last 4 people. Adore nirtha ketto. So many boys have come lately that we should get 2 girls' voices.
Sir, I am Nihana Firoz
ഫസ്റ്റ് ഇയർ ജേർണലിസം സ്റ്റുഡൻറ്റിൻ്റെ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ എന്താ വെച്ചാൽ, കേരളത്തിലെ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ സമ്പ്രദായം മാറ്റങ്ങളിലേക്ക് വഴിത്തിരികയാണല്ലോ. ഒരു വിദ്യാർത്ഥി എന്ന നിലയിൽ ഇവിടുത്തെ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ സമ്പ്രദായത്തോട് എതിർപ്പുള്ള ഒരാളാണ് ഞാൻ. പലതരത്തിൽ നമ്മുടെ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസത്തിൽ ഒരുപാട് മാറ്റങ്ങൾ വരേണ്ടതുണ്ട്. താങ്കൾ ഒരുപാട് വിദ്യാലയങ്ങൾ കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്, ഒരുപാട് വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ സ്ഥാപനങ്ങൾ പഠിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. താങ്കളുടെ നിലപാട് എന്താണ്? എങ്ങനെയുള്ള ഒരു വിദ്യാഭ്യാസമാണ് നമുക്ക് വേണ്ടത്? ഏത് തരമുള്ള വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ സമ്പ്രദായമാണ് നമുക്ക് കൊണ്ടുവരേണ്ടത്?
ഇതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് ഒരു വ്യക്തിക്ക് എല്ലാ ആൻസറും ഉണ്ടാവില്ല. ഞാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞ 2021 തെരഞ്ഞെടുപ്പിൽ നമ്മൾക്ക് ഈ UDFിൻ്റെ പ്രകടന പത്രികയിൽ എഴുതാനുള്ള ആ ചുമതല, മാനിഫെസ്റ്റോ ചുമതല എനിക്ക് തന്നപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ പലവിടെയും പോയി ആൾക്കാരെ കണ്ട് സംസാരിച്ചു. മലപ്പുറത്തും ഓരോരോ ആൾക്കാർ വന്നിട്ട് അത് വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളുണ്ടായിരുന്നു, അധ്യാപകരുണ്ടായിരുന്നു, എല്ലാവരും അഭിപ്രായം പറഞ്ഞു. അപ്പം ഞാൻ പ്രപ്പോസ് ചെയ്ത് ഞങ്ങളുടെ UDF മാനിഫെസ്റ്റോയിൽ ഇപ്പോൾ കൂടി കാണാം, ഒരു കേരള സ്റ്റേറ്റ് ഹയർ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ റിഫോംസ് കമ്മീഷൻ സ്ഥാപിക്കണം. ആ കമ്മീഷനിൽ വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളുണ്ടാവണം, അധ്യാപകരുണ്ടാവണം, അഡ്മിനിസ്ട്രേറ്റേഴ്സ് ഉണ്ടാവണം. പക്ഷേ അത് മാത്രമല്ല, സിവിൽ സൊസൈറ്റി റെപ്രസെൻറ്റേറ്റീവ്സ് ഉണ്ടാവണം, നമ്മളുടെ ക്യാപ്റ്റൻസ് ഓഫ് ഇൻഡസ്ട്രി ഉണ്ടാവണം. എന്താണ് അവർക്ക് ആവശ്യമുള്ളതെന്നൊക്കെ കാണിക്കാൻ. ബിക്കോസ് അവസാനത്തെ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ മേഖലയിൽ നമുക്ക് രണ്ട് കാര്യങ്ങൾ ആവശ്യമുണ്ട്. കുട്ടികൾക്ക് ഈ റിയൽ വേൾഡിൽ ജോലി കിട്ടാനും പ്രവർത്തിക്കാനും നമ്മൾ തയ്യാറാക്കണം. അതിന് എന്തായിരിക്കും, വാട്ട് കൈൻഡ് ഓഫ് സബ്ജക്ട്സ്, വാട്ട് ഡു വി ടീച്ച് ഇൻ യുവർ സബ്ജക്ട്സ്. ഒരു ഉദാഹരണം പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ, ഞാൻ കോൺഗ്രസ് നയിക്കുന്ന സ്ഥാപനമുണ്ട്, ഓൾ ഇന്ത്യ പ്രൊഫഷണൽസ് കോൺഗ്രസ്. അവരൊരു സർവേ നടത്തി കേരളത്തിൽ എഞ്ചിനീയറിംഗ് ഗ്രാജുവേറ്റ്സിൻ്റെ ഇടയിൽ. അവർ കണ്ടുപിടിച്ചെന്താണ്, 66% കേരള എഞ്ചിനീയറിംഗ് ഗ്രാജുവേറ്റ്സ് പറയുന്നു അവരിപ്പം നിലവിലെടുക്കുന്ന ജോലികളിൽ അവർക്ക് എഞ്ചിനീയറിംഗ് ഡിഗ്രീൻ്റെ ആവശ്യമുണ്ടായിരുന്നില്ല. അതിൻ്റെ അർത്ഥം അവർ പഠിച്ച എഞ്ചിനീയറിംഗ് ഡിഗ്രി വെറും വേസ്റ്റായി. ഒന്നുമില്ലെങ്കിൽ ആ പഠിച്ചത് പോരാ, ക്വാളിറ്റി ശരിയല്ല, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ആ പഠിച്ചത് ഇന്നത്തെ യാഥാർത്ഥ്യം, ഇന്നത്തെ റിയാലിറ്റീസ്, വർക്ക് പ്ലേസ് റിയാലിറ്റീസ് റെലവെൻ്റ് അല്ല. ഇതാണ് ബുദ്ധിമുട്ട്. അപ്പോൾ വി ഹാവ് ടു മേക്ക് ഇറ്റ് മോർ റെലവെൻ്റ്. ലാസ്റ്റ് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. First of all, I would like to say thank you for considering me. And my name is Sheetal. I'm a journalism student in MES Arts and Science College.
Hi.
My question is, പല രാജ്യങ്ങളിലും റേപ്പ് ചെയ്ത ഒരു വിക്ടിമിന് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ റേപ്പ് ചെയ്തൊരു പ്രതിക്ക് നൽകുന്നത് ഡെത്ത് പെനാൽറ്റിയാണ്. പക്ഷേ ഇൻ ഇന്ത്യയിൽ അത് വളരെ റെയർ ആയിട്ടുള്ള കേസുകൾക്ക് മാത്രമേ നൽകാറുള്ളൂ. ലാസ്റ്റ് ഇപ്പോൾ 2020 നിർഭയ കേസിലായിരുന്നു നൽകിയിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നത്. നമ്മൾ റേപ്പ് ചെയ്ത പ്രതികൾക്ക് ഇത്തരത്തിലുള്ള ഡെത്ത് പെനാൽറ്റി നൽകുകയാണെങ്കിൽ നമുക്കതിൻ്റെ പെർസെൻറ്റേജ് കുറയ്ക്കാനോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അത് പ്രിവെൻറ്റ് ചെയ്യാനോ സാധിക്കുമെന്ന് തോന്നുന്നുണ്ടോ?
നോക്കൂ, ഈ വിഷയത്തിൽ റേപ്പ് ഇസ് എ ക്രൈം, ഇറ്റ് ഷുഡ് ഗെറ്റ് ദ മോസ്റ്റ് സിവിയർ പണിഷ്മെൻറ്റ്. പക്ഷേ ഡെത്താണോ അതിൻ്റെ പണിഷ്മെൻറ്റ് എന്ന് തീരുമാനിക്കാൻ സുപ്രീം കോടതി പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. ചിലപ്പോൾ ഒരു മൂമെൻറ്റ് ഓഫ് മാഡ്നെസ്സോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കുടിച്ചിട്ടോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഡ്രഗ്സ് കഴിച്ചിട്ടോ ലഹരിயின் ഇൻഫ്ലുവൻസ് അങ്ങനെ വല്ല ഒരു തെറ്റ് ചെയ്താൽ അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് നമ്മൾ കൊല്ലണോ അതോ അദ്ദേഹത്തെ നമ്മൾ പഠിപ്പിക്കണോ, ജയിലിൽ കുറേ വർഷങ്ങൾ ഇരുത്തി മേക്ക് എ ബെറ്റർ ഹ്യൂമൻ ഔട്ട് ഓഫ് ഹിം, റിഫോം ഹിം? ഇതാണ് കോടതി ചോദിക്കണം. പക്ഷേ നമ്മളൊരു വ്യക്തിയെ കണ്ടിട്ട് ഇയാളെ എപ്പോഴും പിന്നെ കൊലപാതകം ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കും എന്ന് കാണുന്ന ഒരു വ്യക്തിയാണെങ്കിൽ, റേപ്പ് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു വ്യക്തിയാണെങ്കിൽ, അങ്ങനെ റെയറസ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് റെയർ കേസസിൽ, അത് സുപ്രീം കോടതിയുടെ ഭാഷയാണ്, they said only in the rarest of rare cases should the death penalty apply. I agree with that. ഞാൻ തന്നെ ഡെത്ത് പെനൽറ്റിയുടെ വലിയ ഫേവറബിൾ അല്ല. കാരണം ഡെത്ത് പെനൽറ്റി എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ശരിക്ക് സർക്കാർ ഒരു കൊലപാതകൻ ചെയ്യാണ്, അത് ശരിയാണ്. I don't think that we should reduce ourselves as a government to the level of a killer.
But I think people will think that we can do again, but there is no punishment. We can live forever. അതാണ് എൻ്റെ ഒരു
ഇല്ലേ. But when you live forever in jail, you are going to be punished. ഇല്ലേ, എന്തൊക്കെ സഹിക്കുന്നു? You can't enjoy your normal life, you can't see family, you can't watch your children grow up. ഇതൊക്കെ ഉണ്ടല്ലോ. അപ്പോൾ ഇങ്ങനെയാണ്. I mean, you have to change your life dramatically because of that mistake. അതാണ് ലൈഫ് സെൻറ്റൻസിൻ്റെ ആവശ്യം. I am personally not convinced that we need more death penalty in the country. So there I tend to agree with the Supreme Court, rarest of rare cases, but punishment must be there. No one should feel that they can rape and get away lightly. I'm shocked by what happened in the Bilkis Banu case in Gujarat, where, as you know, a terrible injustice has been done in that people who have raped and murdered, both rape and murder, have been let off after 11 years in jail. That's, to my mind, not at all acceptable.
Thank you, sir.
All the best to all of you. Sorry for the rest of you. Thank you very much. You've been a very interesting and patient and engaged audience.
We'll be winding up the Q&A session. We would invite you to take a picture with sir. Those who are left couldn't ask pictures, take questions. Please get a picture.
ഈ കുട്ടികൾ ചോദിക്കാൻ സാധിക്കാൻ കുട്ടികൾക്ക് ഒരു ഫോട്ടോ എടുക്കാം. That's fair enough.
Thank you so much, sir. We now invite President of Muslim Education, Dr. Ghafoor sir, to present a memento to Shashi Tharoor sir for this occasion.
I think we should, sir, they are giving some memento. I was suggesting that they build a room in your house to keep your mementos. Okay, sir.
I invite now Mr. O.C. Salahuddin to carry out the vote of thanks. Treasurer, MES, State.
പ്രിയമുള്ളവരെ, മഹത്തായ നമ്മുടെ രാജ്യത്തിൻ്റെ ജനാധിപത്യ മതേതരത്വം ഭരണഘടനയും സംരക്ഷിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടി രാജ്യത്തോടും വിഷമില്ലാതെ ഓടി നടക്കുന്ന നമ്മുടെ പ്രിയനായകൻ, ജനാധിപത്യത്തിൻ്റെ കാവൽക്കാരൻ ശ്രീ ശശി തരൂർ MP വിലപ്പെട്ട സമയം അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ തിരക്കുപിടിച്ച സമയത്തിനോട് ഇവിടെ എത്തുകയും നമ്മോട് സംവദിക്കുകയും ചെയ്ത ഹൃദയത്തിന്റെ ഭാഗത്ത് നന്ദി രേഖപ്പെടുത്തുകയാണ്. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ ഉറ്റ സുഹൃത്ത് നമ്മുടെ അമരക്കാരൻ MES ഫാമിലി മൊത്തം ഈ സമയത്ത് ഹൃദയത്തിന്റെ ഭാഗത്ത് നന്ദി രേഖപ്പെടുത്തുകയാണ്. ഈ വേദി പങ്കിട്ട് അവസാനം നമ്മുടെ കൂടെ ഇരുന്ന നമ്മുടെ MES സംസ്ഥാന സീനിയർ ലീഡർ മുൻ ജനറൽ സെക്രട്ടറി POJ സാർ, EP മോയിൻകുട്ടി സാർ അടക്കമുള്ള MES നേതാക്കൾ, ഡോക്ടർ ഹമീദ് ഫസൽ, MESന്റെ സ്റ്റാൻഡിംഗ് കമ്മിറ്റി ചെയർമാൻമാർ, കേരളത്തിൽ മുഴുവൻ പ്രദേശത്ത് വന്ന MES ലീഡേഴ്സ്, ജീവനക്കാർ, യൂത്ത് ടീം പ്രവർത്തകർ, നല്ല വിദ്യാർത്ഥികൾ, എല്ലാവർക്കും ഹൃദയത്തിന്റെ ഭാഷ നന്ദി രേഖപ്പെടുത്തുന്നു. ജയ് ഹിന്ദ്.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता, पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा, विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंगा, तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मागे, गाहे तव जय गाथा, जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता, जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे। जय हिंद।